Chapter 504. When the scenes of the origin exploding entered his eyes, Zhong Shou only felt like his mind was about to explode. However, he instinctively wanted to remember the scenes in front of him and imprint them in the depths of his soul. It was the core of the absolute beginning. It was really the core of the absolute beginning. He personally saw the light spot increase at an exaggerated rate. Numerous light and heat waves were being produced. A complete world was being swiftly born. In a millionth of an instant, it expanded by trillions of times. Numerous resources, numerous elements were being formed. Where Zhong Shou was at was also affected. Then, like a bubble, it merged into the entire newly born space. The vast energy continued to strike, causing the 81 layers of spiritual light to shatter layer by layer. However, Zhong Shou avoided it when the 7th layer was broken. Even if he knew that at this moment, this newly born world was forming various laws. He might even be able to trace the source of the path, and not dare to look further. He knew that if he continued to look, in just a moment, his mind would explode. Even at this moment, his head still felt an intense headache. Positive energy and negative energy lighting up, black hole and white hole, positive universe and anti-universe, the lines, planes, bodies, 3 dimensions and time that were swiftly spreading out. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Some knowledge from the future, as well as numerous Buddhist and Taoist scriptures, all appeared in his mind. When the light exploded, some detailed scenes flashed in his mind. As expected, all worlds were born from one. Unfortunately, what he saw was too little. It was too little. In his heart, he felt really regretful that his cultivation was still too low. If he could reach God Realm and Saint Realm and see such scenes, he might even be able to trace the source of the path. He was also shocked. Who was the one who made this instrument? The world-viewing instrument could really see the life of a world. The explosion of the core of the absolute beginning, the scenes of the world that was born from one source, shouldn't be able to be seen. They weren't on the same space-time level, so one shouldn't be able to use one's eyes to look at it. Even if he were to fuse with it now, the dazzling light would still be able to completely blind him. It would also cause his body to shatter amidst the crazy expansion of space. However, just now, not only did he truly see it, but his body was perfectly fine. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this world-viewing instrument was a divine artifact. Who was the one who made this thing? Observing the birth of a world, were they the only few end-realm experts in the cloud world? After a long while, the pain in Zhong Shou's head had not completely subsided. It was still hurting faintly. This was a sign of the extreme exhaustion of his heart force. However, those complicated thoughts still didn't stop, one after another. He couldn't help but mock himself. He had only seen a fraction of a second of the absolute beginning. Countless questions arose in his mind, and at the same time, countless doubts were solved. Gradually, the sea of soul started to become unstable. First, the 18 true talismans began to change. Some of the true spiritual charms within started to change. The Qiankuan and Qiankuan talismans, in particular, were fluctuating intensely. Vaguely, it seemed like it was going to merge into a talisman, turning into a U word. As for the time symbol, it was no longer opposing the universe symbol. Instead, it began to fuse with the universe symbol. It suddenly twisted and spread out, wrapping up the remaining 15 true talismans, the black and white whole dharmas, as well as the stars that filled his soul sea. Following which, the black and white holes also changed slightly. Bit by bit, the black hole became darker and darker, while the white hole also became extremely hot. The entire process was totally out of Zhong Shou's control. Pretty much the moment he thought about something, his soul would change. His thoughts were scattered and he was also inspired. Many principles that might have taken a year or even 10 years to comprehend were all unraveled in an instant. If it wasn't for his soul power not being enough, he could have even formed a portion of the God talismans. No. Even if I use up all the potential in my body, I can't be so quick. This spell altar seems a little weird. Sensing the surroundings, he felt that there were numerous talismans on the spell altar that were circling around his body. Coincidentally, they formed a spiritual formation to forcefully suck out something from his body. It caused the thinking speed in his mind to reach the maximum. However, when he observed his body, the vital energy were still abundant, and there were no signs of it weakening. The potential of life was still hidden in the depths of his body. Then, is it lifespan? The moment he guessed, Zhong Shou understood. Apart from that, there were no other possibilities. Although he didn't feel anything, Zhong Shou knew that his current lifespan would be consumed at least 100 to 200 years, maybe even 300 to 500 years. However, he didn't feel any regret in his heart. His soul power was grade 7 and he already had 1,000 years of lifespan. Stepping into grade 8, it would increase by another 200 years. He didn't need to worry about his lifespan running out and dying. To be able to have such a fortuitous encounter was a joyous matter. The upheaval in his spirit only stopped after a full 4 hours and a quarter of an hour, and then stabilized once again. As for Zhong Shou's chaotic thoughts, they slowly calmed down. It wasn't that he took the initiative to suppress his emotions, but that he couldn't comprehend anymore. Before this, he had already comprehended all the things he saw in the scenes of the source, all the things he could understand and grasp. The remaining portion was something he couldn't comprehend and couldn't touch. He had no place to start at all. Luckily, the glow of the spiritual formation around him was slowly dimming. Most probably it had stopped, and his remaining lifespan should be able to be preserved. Opening his eyes once more, Zhong Shou looked outside of the spiritual light barrier. Of the 81 layers of barriers, only 9 were left. However, it had already stabilized, resisting the impact, and seemed unbreakable. The expansion speed of this new universe had also slowly slowed down. The effects of some laws had started to appear. A bright glow flashed in Samuraim's eyes as he looked closely once more. Compared to the explosive impact during the absolute beginning, which caught people off guard, it was much more powerful. At this moment, Zhong Shou could already accept the changes in the world after it slowed down. However, in less than 15 minutes, Zhong Shou's head still had an intense headache. He could only close his eyes once more and stop looking. It was extremely difficult to remember these scenes. Even if the spiritual formation was continuously using his lifespan, Zhong Shou still felt that he couldn't support it. He also felt that if he continued to look at it like this, sooner or later he would die of old age here. To be able to view the scenes of the source and a portion of the laws when he was grade 7. This kind of fortuitous encounter was already extremely rare, and it was already his limit. Although he wasn't willing to accept the remaining parts, why force it? Buddhists had eyes, humans had 6 evils: greed, anger, stupidity, slowness, doubt, and evil. These were the roots of humans, amongst which greed was the first evil of Buddhists. This heart of the path was actually a form of greed. With his mind set, Zhong Shou didn't open his eyes anymore. Since he was bored, he started to use the spiritual formation of the spell altar to activate the great sky-changing meditation technique in his soul to deduce the heaven realm portion of the world's shocking spiritual art. Only now did he notice that his understanding of the laws of heaven and earth and the path was 2 to 3 levels higher than before. The latter portions of the world's shocking spiritual art were being perfected at a shocking speed. He even continued to backtrack to make up for the flaws in the foundations. However, just as Zhong Shou went from ascended ancestor, grandmaster, spiritual grandmaster to the spirit realm portion, he was startled. He couldn't deduce anymore, the path ahead was limited. Without hesitation, Zhong Shou started from the foundations once more. Bit by bit, even the tiniest of flaws and inadequacies were fixed one by one. Body chakra, heaven chakra, earth chakra, entering the celestial path. However, it still didn't work. When he reached the middle spirit realm, he was unable to continue. How is that possible? Zhong Shou was stunned. Then, he crazily deduced over and over. However, when he reached the middle spirit realm, he was unable to complete it. At first, he thought that it was because of his bloodline. However, even if he added in a water element god-beast bloodline that could go up against the sky-burning blood, he could only take half a step forward with the world-shocking spiritual art and cultivate to the late spirit realm. Is it because my Tao foundations aren't enough to create this technique? Or was the idea of the ice and fire spiral technique wrong from the start? Thinking about it carefully, Zhong Shou shook his head. Even though he had failed countless times, he was still confident that he could create a ninth-class martial arts cultivation method. Moreover, the foundations of the world-shocking spiritual art didn't need deep cultivation of the Tao. The ice and fire spiral countered and helped each other, so it couldn't be wrong. Originally, he should have been able to cultivate this cultivation method without any obstructions. Only some unknown factor caused it to fail. Wait, countered and helped each other? Looking at his soul and looking at the black and white whole Dharma, Zhong Shou comprehended something. If ice and fire didn't work, then what about yin and yang? His eyes lit up. Zhong Shou directly pushed the world-shocking spiritual art from before to reconstruct it. This time, it was unobstructed at the start. However, in the end, when he stepped into the celestial path, he was stuck and was unable to make any progress. In the end, it was worse than the previous few times. Why did he feel like he was lacking something? The Taoists say that alone yin won't give birth, alone yang won't grow. Is that the reason? But that's a little too much. Zhong Shou broke out into a laugh. However, he still tried to deduce once more. Then, his expression completely froze. He actually succeeded. He was able to proceed forwards like a hot knife through butter. The obstacles before spirit realm were all unobstructed, and he was progressing all the way to intermediate celestial realm. Zhong Shou frowned. He only felt that his extremely active thoughts started to calm down. He was unable to continue with his deductions. The spell altar below shook slightly. Did it end? When Zhong Shou opened his eyes once more, he saw the space in front of him being ripped apart once more. This spell altar was being pulled in a certain direction by an extremely vast power. When Zhong Shou came back to his senses, he saw that the spell altar had returned to its original spot. It was still on the stone platform. The world-viewing instrument above also regained its silence. It was cold and lifeless like it had never moved. Chapter 505. Zhong Shou looked at the rings above. He still didn't understand and didn't have the intention to understand. Taking a look, he immediately walked out of the spell altar. He was afraid that he would be teleported to another unopened world for no reason. Moreover, he didn't have so much lifespan to use. Following the stone bridge that stretched across space, Zhong Shou walked out. Just as he was about to cross the door, he heard a laugh in his ear. So that's the case. Unlimited light and endless darkness, luck talisman. No wonder you can use this world viewing platform. Interesting. There are still such juniors in the cloud world. Grade 7 to see the opening of a world. Who knows if it is a blessing or a curse for you? Take care. Zhong Shou was astonished. The voice was so sudden, like it was right beside his ear. He turned around, only to see that there was no one around. His spiritual sense didn't sense anything weird. Frowning, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to step out of the door. Then, he turned around and looked at the building, entering deep thought. That voice was really weird. Was it the owner of this stargazing tower? However, it didn't sound like it had any bad intentions. Shaking his head, Zhong Shou could only temporarily place down all his question. First, he summoned out a water mirror, thinking to himself that with so much lifespan being sucked out, would he turn into an old man? He didn't like acting young, but he wasn't willing to turn into an old man. Looking at the mirror, Zhong Shou was slightly startled, only to see that his face was still young. It was still that extremely young face, without any change at all. A moment later, Zhong Shou comprehended something, sighing as he face-bombed. Legend had it that after grade 7, people with deep foundations would be able to maintain their look. How did he forget? Which meant that in the future, he would always look like a 16-year-old. After feeling dejected for a moment, Zhong Shou forced out a drop of fresh blood from his finger. Then, he chanted some incantations, and after a few spells, an inch-long light shone out from the blood. This was a secret technique used in the later generations to test one's lifespan. It could even be used on ordinary people. The results of the test made even Zhong Shou frown. 30 years. The consumption of his lifespan in the world-viewing instrument was actually over 900 years. If he couldn't make a breakthrough in his cultivation, he would only have 30 years left to live. Zhong Shou's eyes flashed as he sighed, but he did not take it to heart. What really made him depressed was that he had spent at least 7 days in the world-viewing instrument. The Dragon Palace opened on the first day and closed on the third day. In other words, the current Dragon Hall had probably been closed for a long time. This was the thing that gave him a headache. There was also a piercing pain in his head, causing him to lose consciousness. He had expended too much of his mental strength, and no matter what spirit pills he used, it was impossible for him to recover in a short period of time. As he walked down the stone steps, Zhong Shou was once again stunned. He saw that at the energy-accumulating altar, Zhong Yuan, Ruoshui, and the Feishuang sisters were still beside the pond, looking over in shock. Zhong Shou was also really confused as he flew over. Just as he was about to ask the few of them why they hadn't left after 3 days had passed, he saw that the world-viewing instrument's body was suddenly stunned. Following which, he saw that the lightning-winged flood dragon and the 7 silver cocoons were still in the depths of the pond. He immediately changed his question. How long was I gone for? What time is it now? Was it long? Just now I saw you walk over there. First, you mysteriously disappeared for about a breath of time, and then you came back. Yi Feishuang had a weird expression on her face as she looked at Zhong Shou's ashen white face. Worry appeared in her eyes. Are you okay? Zhong Shou was stunned once more. Was the 7 days just a breath? When he turned his head around, the stone platform from before had totally disappeared and he couldn't see it anymore. Frowning slightly, Zhong Shou's expression returned to normal after a short while. He smiled. Why? Are you worried about me? Scoff. I was just afraid that something would happen to you and you wouldn't be able to enter the Legacy Land. Yi Feishuang turned her head in disdain. This energy-accumulating essence fountain can replace the dragon spirit blood birth pill. However, there are a few spiritual items in the Legacy Land. It would be a waste if we don't go and get them. While Yi Feishuang was speaking, Yi Feiyan beside her made a cute face towards Zhong Shou. She pointed at her lips and then at her heart, waving her hands. This was Zhong Shou's way of telling her that his sister didn't mean what she said. Zhong Shou broke into a laugh. Only then did Yi Feishuang come back to her senses, turning her head and staring furiously at her sister. There were still close to 18 hours until the lightning-winged flood dragon transformed into a dragon. Zhong Shou sat quietly and waited. Surprisingly, he didn't try to comprehend anything and didn't meditate to cultivate. His mind was totally relaxed, and his breathing was shallow. His consciousness was half asleep and half awake, and his thoughts had all stopped. He used such a method that was close to hibernation, stopping all signs of life to recover the energy he used up. Who knows how long passed, but a dragon roar broke out from the pond and shook the clouds. Zhong Shou opened his eyes, only to see a dragon-shaped creature covered in purple scales struggling out. It was the lightning-winged flood dragon. After its body transformed, it had shrunk a little. However, the purple lightning around its body became denser and denser. The dragon aura was vast, and even Zhong Shou's brows furrowed. On the sides of the dragon's body, there was a pair of wings. It seemed like it could absorb the true fire of the sun, and the flames wrapped around it. After flying in the air for a few minutes, the lightning-winged flood dragon suddenly landed beside Zhong Shou, docilely circling by his side. Yi Feishuang looked expressionlessly, a look of envy appearing in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared. Not bad. Just transforming into a dragon and your bloodline is intermediate grade, no weaker than those natural god beasts. Unfortunately, your lightning-winged flood dragon's bloodline is mixed with the blood of the winged flood dragon. If you can't reject or merge with it, it will be a disaster and not a blessing. Zhong Shou acknowledged, but he didn't bother, continuing to look at the energy-accumulating fountain. Logically speaking, the advancement of these 7 Saint Fire Silver Ants should be a little faster than that of the lightning-winged flood dragon. As expected, a moment later, the largest silver egg started to move. It didn't break out of the cocoon, but the threads were swiftly retracting. In just a moment, a silver light flew up from the pond. It came in front of Zhong Shou and coldly stared at him. Its eyes regained the arrogance from before, filled with an untamed and provocative intent. It was trying to go against Zhong Shou's soul power control. Its body was burning with silver-white flames. Zhong Shou was delighted, and then the expression in his eyes changed. He didn't forcefully activate the soul control formation as well as the Taishian heart-locking soul settling talisman to suppress it. Instead, his aura turned cold, and a sword intent exploded out. Like it came from the ancient source, the beginning of all things. The sword intent pressed down on Hanqi's body, causing the flames of the Saint Fire Silver Ant to disappear. Its body actually trembled slightly, revealing fear. Just now, it wanted to go against Zhong Shou's control, but now it was afraid of Zhong Shou like a tiger. Chu Shui, who was sleeping on the side, frowned, asking curiously, "Absolute beginning?" Zhong Shou turned around and looked at this brat. He was slightly confused, but he didn't notice anything weird. Was this Shui talking in her sleep? But why did she use the word absolute beginning? What she used just now was the small bit of intent that she comprehended from the world viewing platform and the absolute beginning core. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning of all things. Even natural variance could be suppressed. At this moment, the lightning-winged dragon behind Zhong Shou roared, filled with a threatening intent. Hanqi's body shook once more, looking at longing behind Zhong Shou. Its eyes were filled with shock. Dragons were god beasts, the same grade as natural variant. At this moment it was grade 8. Its threatening strength was totally different from before when it was just a winged flood dragon. Flying back dozens of feet in fear, Hanqi was totally tamed. Its eyes regained calmness and it didn't struggle anymore. At this moment, Zhong Shou paid close attention to the changes on Hanqi's body. It was half a foot taller, its 4 knife arms stretched out and became much sharper. The 6 pairs of wings on its back were covered in silver patterns. That silver-white saint flame burned and wrapped around its body. It seemed more and more pure, its entire form was extremely beautiful. It was like a real angel-winged person. It was unbelievable that this thing came from that ugly and disgusting demon fire crystal ant. Zhong Shou was also astonished. In the next moment, he felt a spiritual sense fluctuation spread over from Hanqi, and he was in deep thought. He understood that this was Hanqi's evolution information. After this Saint Fire Ant Queen advanced to grade 8, it had 2 choices. One was to self-reproduce and split, and it could split into 4 more intermediate grade 7 Saint Fire Silver Ant. The other choice was to strengthen those 6 silver ants and raise them by half a grade. One more step above the intermediate grade 7 to reach the peak level. Be it strength or control of heaven and earth spiritual energy, it was just half a grade away. Its speed wasn't any weaker and was several times better. Once Hanshi advanced to the intermediate grade 8, it could jump a realm at the same time. Hanshi asked him to make a decision as a sign of submission. Zhong-Shou took in a deep breath and chose the latter without hesitation. Unless it was tens of thousands of them, 100,000 or 1,000,000 troops, if not having 4 more Saint Fire Silver Ants wouldn't be of much use. Why not strengthen the other 6 silver ants a little more? It would be more beneficial. Just as he made his decision, the depths of the pond shone with an eye-piercing silver light. Those 6 Saint Fire Silver Ants had some changes. When the silver cocoons disappeared, they all flew out from the pond and hung beside Hanshi. They were similar to Hanshi, their blades were sharper, their silver armor was sturdier, and their 4 pairs of wings had silver patterns. Their bodies also changed, looking like a human, but they were still mostly bug-shaped. Their flying speed was no weaker than Hanshi, much better than when they were grade 7. As for their specific strength, he had to see it in battle. Zhong-Shou didn't take a close look, keeping all these few silver ants. Then, he looked at the energy-accumulating pond in front of him. He sighed in his heart, who knows whether or not Little Lei and Hanshi's bath water had any effect on Ao Kuan. Chapter 506. In his heart, he felt that it wasn't reliable. However, Zhong-Shou still took out a few porcelain bottles with space ability to suck the fountain water dry. According to the energy accumulating fountain water and essence fountain water, he placed them in different type. Following which, he followed Yi Feishuang's instructions to dig out the tens of stones with spiritual light. This was the source of the energy accumulating fountain water. If he buried it in a place with more spiritual energy, in a short while he would be able to build a dragon transformation pond. However, to reach such a scale it would take hundreds of years. Following which, they followed the original path out of this small vast habitat space. Before Zhong-Shou left, he purposely left a sensing mark. In the future, if he had spirit realm and celestial realm cultivation, he might be able to forcefully occupy this small vast habitat. After exiting the whirlpool, Zhong-Shou also exploded out many high-grade mind stones. Balls of pure heaven and earth spiritual energy forced out all the formations and restrictions. The few of them were scared but not in any danger as they once again returned to the wilderness. Just at that moment, Zhong-Shou suddenly frowned and looked towards the center of the east side of the Dragon Hall, only to see a vast spiritual light explode out. Following which, it split into hundreds of streaks and spread out in all directions, falling all over. Someone should have already arrived at the Legacy Land. Yi Feishuang took a close look, a mocking smile appeared on her face. It is just the lowest grade 9 spiritual artifact. He reckoned that they were all running pretty fast. They must have used a forceful attack strategy. How would it be so simple to obtain all the spiritual items in the Legacy Land? Zhong-Shou's strength hadn't recovered and he was still having a headache. His consciousness only lasted for a moment before he woke up. However, when he heard that, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Grade 9 spiritual artifact? Just that? That was a few hundred of them. This Dragon Hall was so rich that oil flowed out. The Land of Inheritance was also marked on the map scroll. However, it was obvious that Yi Feishuang didn't understand it as well as she did. Following this woman, they traveled in the air. As expected, she didn't care about the spiritual formations and restrictions. Along the way, they occasionally met 1 or 2 cultivators. However, when they saw the Type 9 silver-armored paperman and the Type 9 ice Jiao beside Zhong-Shou, they did not hesitate to retreat. He seemed to have gained a lot of benefits and was afraid that Zhong-Shou and the others would have evil intentions. The so-called Land of Legacy was a stone hall, but it was thousands of times larger than the one they had entered. There was also a large mountain behind them. According to the map on the scroll, the true core area was in a cave within the mountain. This place was also the core of the entire Dragon Hall's spirit array. It was not impossible to forcefully break through from outside the mountain, but unless it was a deity realm expert, it would be asking for trouble. The spiritual weapons that had exploded and disappeared should have come from one of the side halls. When they arrived, they realized that many cultivators had already gathered in the palace. There were more than 400 people, both righteous and demonic. They were divided into 17 groups. His aura was oppressive, and his killing intent was faintly discernible, as if he was about to erupt at any moment. It was not only the demon sect with fewer people who were in a standoff with the righteous path. Even the many sects were wary of one another. Zhong Shou was slightly confused, but before he asked, Li Rushuang explained, in the past, only 20 people could enter this land of legacy. Now that a portion of the spiritual formation has been destroyed, only 30 people can enter. That is probably the limit. Zhong Shou was enlightened. 20 people? 20 dragons, right? However, if there were only 30 spots, then it would be tough to split them. Then, do you and Feiyan want to enter? Even if the two of them weren't of the dragon race, they definitely had the bloodline of the dragon race. The meaning of the land of legacy to them was definitely different. No need. Feiyan and I are only grade 6, it is useless even if we enter. Yi Feishuang shook her head. We don't want to enter the third dragon hall. As for which dragon hall it was, she didn't say. Zhong Shou understood and didn't ask anymore. He smiled as he looked at the hundreds of people in a standoff. A moment later, Fang Ming walked out and said, Everyone, less than a day and a half has passed. If this drags on, none of us will want to enter. Why don't we all take a step back and choose a few people based on the number of people to enter together? The people here were totally silent, no one made a sound. Those who were weaker agreed, but when they noticed that the atmosphere here was really cold, they instantly kept their mouths shut. Fang Ming also felt his head hurt, rubbing his brow. If you all trust me, then how about I split the spots? The people here looked at each other, and all of them had a look of approval on their faces. When Fang Ming saw the situation, he wasn't courteous, smiling. Tailing sect is the top sect of our cloud world, 4 people can enter. The second shrine, Yuanshi demon sect, is also from our cloud world, 4 people can enter. The Two Worlds Shanming Temple is the main mountain of the Buddhist Huayan sect, 4 people can enter. The fourth shrine, Haoshuan sect, 3 people can enter. Everyone in the hall frowned slightly at first. However, as the voice continued, the expressions of a small half of them gradually calmed down. Most of the remaining people were unhappy. However, when the many disciples of Tailing sect and Yuanshi demon sect coldly swept their gazes over, they were all silent. Li Feishuang looked on from afar, her eyes filled with respect. This Fang Ming really lives up to his name. He is fair and able to convince the masses. Zhong Shou smiled. Whether or not this person was fair and just, he didn't know. However, he knew that this person was really smart. He first roped in Tailing sect and Yuanshi demon sect as well as other strong sections. As for the weaker sects, even if they were unhappy, they wouldn't dare to fight back. What made one feel weird was that this time Qingdao didn't include the 3 sects and 6 schools. However, apart from him, no one else joined in the opening of the Dragon Hall. Was there something else that they couldn't join in? Fang Ming said halfway and looked toward Zhong Shou, his eyes flashing. This is the Gantian Mountain Monster King, Zhong Shou? How about the 7 of you split a spot? Zhong Shou didn't think much, directly shaking his head. 2. Fang Ming's lips instantly curled up coldly, his eyes filled with a mocking expression. However, when he looked at the grade 9 silver-armored man behind Zhong Shou and the ice flood dragon, his face sunk and he was in deep thought, not saying anything. Zhong Shou praised silently, such silence was just right. No matter if this Fang Ming was a gentleman or not, his schemes were amazing. As expected, in the next moment, he heard someone say coldly, There are over 10 of us and we only get 1 spot. There are only 7 of you and you want 2 spots. What kind of logic is that? Zhong Shou's brows rose up, only to see that the person who spoke was a grade 8 Yuanshi demon sect disciple. As for the other people in the hall, they all looked over with cold gazes filled with anger. Zhong Shou smiled. The silver-armored man behind him suddenly flashed and appeared in front of the Yuanshi demon sect disciple. A fist punched out. Suddenly there was a loud explosion. The astral wind surged, smashing that person and the 4 people beside him who came to help. They were all forcefully sent flying with a single punch. The Yuanshi demon sect disciple who spoke coughed out blood. His entire person was smashed 10,000 feet out, triggering the restrictions of the spiritual formation. Instantly, he was surrounded by flames and he cried out in pain. He barely managed to escape, but he was on his last breaths. As for the silver-armored man, it was perfectly fine, standing on the spot. Following which, it punched out with another grade 9 spiritual grandmaster. Only to hear an explosion. The ground was firm and fine, but the numerous cultivators around were all forced back by the aura. The silver-armored man was also forced back. However, it stopped 100 feet away. Opposite him, the grade 9 expert from the Yuanshi demon sect had a slight advantage. However, his expression was really solemn, like he was facing a huge enemy. The people in the hall were all startled. They knew that this grade 9 silver-armored man could go up against grade 9 experts, but in the end it wasn't as strong as a true grade 9. Using 5 grade 8 experts to go up against it, it was smashed away with one fist. In a rush, it was able to punch against a grade 9 spiritual grandmaster, but it was still perfectly fine. If it wasn't for them being able to confirm that it was formed from a spiritual talisman, they would have thought that there was a true spiritual grandmaster hidden within the body of the paperman. Fist intent, extreme fist intent. I forgot that your highness is also at the peak of the martial path. How can the puppet spirit descending talisman he controls be the same as normal spirit masters? The expressions of the many Yuanshi demon sect cultivators changed, killing intent exploding out. Following which, the Tailing sect and 2 World Mountain Ming Miao temple people's expressions turned serious, like they wanted to attack, but they were hesitating. However, in the next instance, Zhong Shou took out another puppet spirit descending talisman. After shaking it out, instantly a grade 9 silver-armored man appeared beside it. Following which this paper man had a grade 8 spiritual sword. A sword intent exploded out, a dragon-shaped sword energy charged out of his body, suppressing the entire hall. The 400-plus people here all fell silent. This sword intent was sword intent connected to the spirit. Today in this place, the one with the biggest fist is the reason. What does Brother Fong think about that? Zhong Shou smiled, causing the coldness in the hall to become even deeper. I, Zhong Shou, like to use morals to convince people, but if they don't reason with me, Zhong Shou, I won't hesitate. Zhong Shou doesn't mind flipping the table. Fongming's expression didn't change, but his expression was complicated as he looked at Zhong Shou. He didn't hesitate and nodded his head, okay. Following which he turned his head and didn't look at Zhong Shou anymore. The other people in the hall didn't make a sound. Even the Yuanshi demon sect people, although their eyes were filled with rage, they forcefully suppressed it. Yi Feishuang at the side didn't speak until everyone stopped paying attention to them. Her brows furrowed tightly. Do you know what you are doing? That is the Yuanshi demon sect. If they are serious, they can crush you with one finger. Even if you have Tsang Xing Dao as your shield, don't forget that you also have Gantian Mountain. Don't drag us down. Zhong Shou shook his head and laughed. What should he say to this woman? Gantian Mountain's wings were already strong. Even if they didn't have 7,000 Blood Cloud Cavalry, they could go up against the Cloud World's Yuanshi demon sect. Be it Zhong Shou or Tanqiu, they could do whatever they wanted in this world. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Chapter 507. When Yi Feishuang saw that Zhong Shou didn't care, she frowned and wanted to persuade him once more. However, Zhong Yuan shook his head and said, "Ruler's actions seem rash, but he has his reasons. Choosing to attack the second shrine Yuanshi demon sect is enough to shock many sections. Offending one of them is better than offending all the sects." His words were filled with respect. However, the gaze that Zhong Yuan looked over was filled with worry. He didn't care about the Yuanshi demon sect, as Gantian Mountain had enough combat strength to deal with them. However, for Zhong Shou to help him get a spot, paying such a price made him feel a little uneasy. Just now, it didn't match Zhong Shou's personality. He didn't hesitate to attack the Yuanshi demon sect disciples. His methods were sharp and he found it weird. Zhong Shou was startled by Zhong Yuan's gaze, and then he was deep in thought. Was he too arrogant? Too proud? Lost his mind because of power? Thinking about it carefully, Zhong Shou shook his head. With Hanshi and the lightning-winged dragon, which had just advanced to grade 8, along with these two papermen, he could even go up against peak grade 9 experts. Gantian Mountain's 4,000 blood cloud cavalry were enough to go up against any sect. Thinking back, Zhong Shou's brows slowly furrowed. All of a sudden, he realized what was going on. His other self had returned. He lost his father when he was young and his right to enter a famous school was taken away. When he was 18, he started to make a name for himself in the business world. He had some achievements but was suppressed and plotted against, causing his mother to die. When he was 21, he had no choice but to stay in the library. When he came into contact with the God Emperor, he started his martial path career. At that time, he hated the heavens for not having eyes and the earth for not having a heart. Pretty much everyone could be killed in his eyes. Within the God Emperor, after he had some achievements, he left the library and entered the cloud ocean. On one hand, he trained his sword techniques and martial path in the God Emperor virtual world. On the other hand, he started to fight under the cloud ocean. Unknowingly, he obtained the Styx River Death Sword and started to crazily kill. Numerous cultivators fell to his hands. Similarly, large amounts of beasts died in front of him. At that time, he wasn't much weaker than 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling. It wasn't until he was 30 when he broke through to Heaven Realm and killed all the enemies who caused his mother's death did he return to the library to cultivate. However, the him that disappeared seemed to have returned a little. Thinking about it, Zhong Shou knew that it was most probably the repercussions from the stargazing tower. The scenes of a world opening had already affected his foundations too. Zhong Shou couldn't help but laugh. He had no intention of suppressing himself. His other self was also himself, and this was one of his natural instincts. He just needed to let nature take its course. Why should he resist? When he returned to the library, he tried his best to restrain his killing intent. It wasn't because he regretted it, but because he knew that if he continued to kill, it would be harmful to him. Now, since his s2t2 to him, 2 So what if he was domineering? Yi Feishuang didn't know about the changes in Zhong Shou's mind. Hearing their tone, it seemed like they didn't care about the Yuanshi demon sect at all. She was furious. "I really don't know if I should say that you are arrogant or arrogant." After mocking him, Yi Feishuang thought about it seriously and took out a jade letter. That legacy land is a maze. However, there are still some clues to follow. Fayan and I have memories of this legacy land that might be useful to the two of you. There is one more thing you need to remember. Within the legacy land, you might not be able to use external strength. Out of the few of them, she and Fayan wouldn't enter. Chu Shui also didn't have the right and was in deep sleep. Ruoshui also didn't have anything related to the dragon race. Only Zhong Yuan and Zhong Shou had the 2 spot. Zhong Shou took it without any hesitation and sent his spiritual sense into it. In just a moment, he memorized everything and casually passed it to Zhong Yuan. Just as the few of them were speaking, Fang Ming had already decided on the 30 spots. The atmosphere in the hall instantly relaxed. Although many people were unhappy, they weren't willing to say anything. The 10 over sects all sent out a few people. Most of them were grade 7. However, sects like Tailing Sect and Yuanshi Demon Sect had 1 or 2 grade 9 spiritual grandmasters. Fang Ming was also prepared to personally enter. Who knows what secret technique he used to suppress his aura to grade 7. The entrance to the Legacy Land was a stone door deep within the hall that was extremely huge. Zhong Shou followed these people and entered. First, he was pierced by a strong light such that he couldn't open his eyes. By the time his eyesight returned to normal, he was already in the middle of a vast wilderness. Only now did he know what Yi Feishuang meant when she said that one couldn't use external strength in this Legacy Land. The moment he entered, the 2 puppet spirit descending talismans were suppressed by an external strength. They were forced to retract them, turning back into 2 talismans and returning to his hands. Hanshi seemed to be really uncomfortable, actually taking the initiative to hide in the spiritual beast bag at his waist. As for the lightning-winged dragon, it hid deep within his arm and didn't make any movements. However, this external strength should be referring to grade 7 and above strength. Little gold, which was wrapped around his left hand, was totally fine. He looked around and saw that there were still a few people in this seemingly endless wilderness. They all looked at one another warily. There were actually 2 people from the Yuanshi Demon Sect who looked at Zhong Shou with dangerous gazes. As for Zhong Yuan, he was nowhere to be seen. The teleportation location shouldn't be in the same place. Zhong Shou laughed coldly, his hand holding the sword at his waist as he expressionlessly looked back at the 2 of them. The 2 Yuanshi Demon Sect cultivators seemed to have finally recalled something. Zhong Shou's strength didn't just rely on the 2 grade 9 papermen. His own sword path was already connected to the spirit. They scoffed, turning around and leaving unhappily. Looking on as the 2 of them disappeared, Zhong Shou shook his head, casually choosing another direction to head in. Based on what Yi Feishuang said, this wilderness was actually an illusion that if one didn't enter the celestial path, one wouldn't be able to break out of it. No matter which direction one chose, it was the same. When the time came, naturally there would be gains. The treasures within the Legacy Land would naturally appear in front of one's eyes. As expected, moments later, Zhong Shou's eyes turned dark blue. Before this, it was still the wilderness, but now he was on a deep blue lake. A small bridge led to the center of the lake. A grade 8 purple long ing circled above the stone bridge. It was actually a giant lightning dragon that roared at Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou didn't bother looking at the center, only to see 3 fingernail-sized crystals floating in midair above the island. My luck is not bad. Smiling, Zhong Shou stepped forwards onto the stone bridge. Actually, the reality of this place was that there was no water and no bridge. However, at this moment, why would he bother? The purple long ing seemed to be unhappy that someone was trespassing on its territory, roaring in rage as it charged down. Zhong Shou's eyes flashed. The broken tan sword in his hand turned into a silver light as it flashed out. There was no one else here, so he didn't have to worry about anything. The moment he slashed out, he went all out. Platinum Dragon Sword. Slash. Sword light flashed, as if a real platinum dragon was soaring. Zhong Shou's aura was even purer than that of a high-grade dragon. When the Long Ing roared, the purple Long Ing in front of Zhong Shou was directly slashed into 2 by the sword light. Then, the entire body of the Long Ing started to disintegrate. There was no blood or flesh left as it scattered into the air. At this moment, Zhong Shou was looking at the sword in his hand. His sword path seemed to have improved once more. Even the true dragon sword intent that he wasn't very good at had reached the sword soul level. There was also something more, an aura that wasn't there before. Spontaneously, it merged into his sword Dao. Was it the absolute beginning? Zhong Shou's brows rose, following which he kept the broken tan sword back into the sheath. He stepped onto the small island in the middle of the lake and collected all the crystal chip. This wasn't an illusion, but a real thing. A true smile appeared on Zhong Shou's face. He touched the fingernail-sized crystal pieces on his right arm and merged into it. It looked like it was absorbed into his skin, but in truth, the lightning-winged dragon had swallowed it into its body. These few crystal pieces were the bloodline ability of the lightning-winged dragon bloodline, as well as a portion of how to use the power of lightning. Based on what Yi Feishuang said, this was the hardest thing to find. It was purely up to luck. Once he found it, it would be enough to increase the combat strength potential of the lightning-winged dragon. In the next instance, the blue space started to collapse. One by one, the fragments fell down and then disappeared. It returned back to the wilderness from before. There was no one around, but in the sky, there was a giant golden rock that charged downwards. Before this, it was 100,000 feet high, but in just half a breath, it was inches away. The legacy land of the dragon race was meant to test the descendants of the dragon race and pass down the bloodline. The god-beast golden-winged rock was the enemy of the dragon race. Everything in the world had its natural counter. This golden-winged rock was born with a natural counter to all dragon-type creatures. Even the lightning dragon hidden in his right arm seemed to be somewhat afraid of him. Zhong Shou didn't even think as he slashed out with his sword. White light and purple light intertwined and slashed into the sky. Long Ing, break! The platinum dragon sword and the lightning dragon sword instantly stacked together. Outside of the white light, tens of thousands of lightning flashed and broke the two giant claws. The sword light didn't stop as it directly broke into the stomach of the golden-winged rock. It tore the god-beast into pieces, following which Zhong Shou exclaimed in shock. He reached out and grabbed, only to see a bloody heart in Zhong Shou's hand. The golden-winged rock disappeared, but only the heart was left. Chapter 508. Is it the heart of a golden-winged rock? The golden-winged rock in this world was already extinct, only the outer region had some. Naturally, what he had in his hands couldn't be real, but even if it was a subspecies, it was still amazing. Just as Zhong Shou was surprised, the lightning-winged dragon hiding in his right arm suddenly popped out its head. It took a huge bite. It swallowed the heart of the golden-winged rock into its stomach. Legend had it that the golden-winged rock could absorb the essence of the dragon race and obtain strength, especially the dragon gallbladder, which it loved to eat. On the other hand, if the dragon race could eat the heart of the golden-winged rock, they would obtain many benefits. Not only could it increase the strength of their abilities, but the strength of their body could also increase. Just as the thunder-winged dragon swallowed the bloody heart, the thunder-winged dragon's eyes lit up. Zhong Shou could feel that the wings of the natural protector beast had changed. Although he couldn't see it, he knew that the wings were definitely brighter and more eye-catching, and could absorb more sun-true flames. When the heart disappeared in his hand, Qin Wentian was stunned. The scene in front of Zhong Shou changed once more. This time, there were more than 10 figures. They were all dressed in black and each of them held a maroon chain in their hands. Juelong City? In that instant, Zhong Shou thought that the person in front of him was a real person. It was Juelong City who came to take revenge. Moments later, he comprehended and knew that the people in front of him were illusions. That Songlong Ocean Juelong City might not have existed for 14,000 years. However, these people who hunted and killed dragons definitely existed 14,000 years ago. They already existed. Zhong Shou was startled, and then his lips curled up. What should he say? This dragon race really paid attention to education. This was the core of the spiritual formation of the legacy land. He must have mistaken Linley for a lightning dragon. The first battle was arranged with a grade 8 giant lightning dragon to help him understand his strength. The second and third battle were the enemies of the dragon race. More than a dozen black chains shot towards him from all directions. There was a huge hook at the tip with a double-edged blade. If the 12 rank 8 powerhouses had been an ordinary rank 7 dragon, they would have been cut into several dozen pieces by the chains. However, to Zhong Shou, it wasn't much harder than the previous 2 battles. His figure abruptly retreated like a swift shadow, avoiding the hook and chain. With a flick of his sleeve, a total of 365 golden needles scattered in all directions. Zhong Shou then activated True Flames. The sky-burning flame in his hand suddenly burned up. Then, bits of purple lightning were injected into it. Just as it was about to explode, Zhong Shou suddenly threw it out. With a loud explosion, black flames began to violently burn, enveloping the entire area within a radius of 10,000 feet. Deep purple electric currents continuously pulsed and flickered between the 365 golden needles. Cries of agony could be heard from the entire area. Even though he knew that it wasn't true, it still made his hair stand on end when he heard it. When the black flames dissipated, the last bit of lightning also disappeared without a trace. As for the 12 stage 8 figures, they had already completely turned into dust, shattering the air and scattering. However, within the ashes, pills gradually appeared one after another. There were a total of 12, all of them had a blue glow. They looked like pearls but weren't pearls, like jade but weren't jade. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed as he kept them all back into his hand, entering deep thought once more. In his mind, he searched for any memories regarding this item. This is a dragon bone relic? Legend had it that when a high-grade dragon's corpse was burned, it would be formed from the dragon bones. It was the most essential item of the dragon race. It was said that during these 10,000 years, Juelong City hunted the dragon race to crazily collect this item. Looking at the grade of this relic, it should be formed from the corpse of a spirit race person above the spirit realm. Yi Feishuang was right in this legacy land. Even if he lost, it was okay, there were still many benefits. However, if he won, the things he obtained would be even more delightful. Just as he was thinking, that lightning-winged dragon popped its head out once more. It looked at Zhong Shou with a craving gaze. Zhong Shou laughed involuntarily, casually tossing the 12 dragon bone relic into the mouth of the lightning-winged dragon. Although he had some use for this item, it was still inferior to his. However, they couldn't compare to his innate protector beast. Almost every dragon bone relic could make its fleshly body stronger. He continued forwards, only taking 3 steps. In front of Zhong Shou's eyes, there was a 4th change. Is this the last time? Zhong Shou muttered as he looked forward. It was said that there were a total of 9 tests in the Legacy Land. However, only the first 4 were in the illusionary realm. The change this time should be the last illusion. This was a starry sky, and there were countless dragons fighting with their enemies. In the horizon, there were numerous giants, numerous phoenix birds, numerous mutated beasts, and also human race cultivators. There were also many alien races. The night demons with black wings, the fire spirit race whose soul was covered in fire tattoos, and even when they breathed, they spat out flames. The golden-winged race who drove chariots and charged all around. All sorts of weird races were surrounding a crack in the void, killing one another. Just one look and one would feel that it was really majestic, hard for one to comprehend. It is an ancient war. Zhong Shou's eyes squinted as he retracted his thoughts. Such a majestic blood war had occurred dozens of times in the middle of the God-Emperor era, causing numerous deaths and injuries. The races that disappeared from the Cloud Desolate era once more returned to the Cloud world. During these 10,000 years, the experts who headed to the outer region all returned one by one. Almost every other year, there would be a large-scale, earth-shaking, bloody battle. In the game, it was pretty much perfectly simulated. Zhong Shou had seen it before, so naturally, he wouldn't be too shocked. He frowned and thought deeply. This stage obviously didn't need him to help the dragon race obtain victory, that was far out of his ability. Then, the only answer would be how to survive in this war. Calming himself down, Zhong Shou started to walk forwards with his arms behind his back. He swam within the energy that was sweeping all around. Although his cultivation was low, his martial path cultivation had reached the sword soul level and was already really strong. Around him, as long as it wasn't a celestial realm battle, he would be able to predict and plan a way to avoid it. He had also seen the scenes of the absolute beginning. Sometimes, before his brain could think clearly, his body would instinctively react. As expected, after walking for a short while, Zhong Shou walked to the edge of the battlefield without any injuries. This area of the void started to crumble once more. Something appeared in Zhong Shou's hand. It was a pair of pure black wings. Each half was made up of 33,333 night demon feathers that were as hard as steel. Night demon wings? No. Looking closely, apart from being able to hide one's aura, it could also be used as armor to wrap one's body. Within it was also filled with the power of space. It should be able to travel through space. Unfortunately, he couldn't try it out. However, his natural protector beast couldn't use this item, but Ruoshui would definitely love it. With this item, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Interesting, this battle was to inform the juniors. On the battlefield, surviving was the most important thing? They all said that the dragon race was wise. It was really true. The illusionary realm totally collapsed. A true scene finally appeared in front of Zhong Shou's eyes. It was still the void, but he saw that the sky was filled with close to real stars. Although the area in front of him was vast, there were numerous spiritual patterns and restrictions spread all over, constantly changing. There was already a person within, a 30-year-old purple-masked Taoist. Zhong Shou had seen him before. He should have come from the second shrine Daoming sect. He was traveling through the spiritual patterns and restrictions, occasionally triggering them. In the starry sky, there would always be a streak of light landing. Although the purple-masked Taoist was finding it tough, he was totally fine. Step by step, he stably walked forward. When Zhong Shou arrived, the purple-masked Taoist looked back in shock. He didn't expect that someone would arrive here so quickly. Zhong Shou looked into the distance. Then, his eyes flashed. At the end of the starry sky, there was actually a ball of magnificent spirit jade marrow. It could help one to break through the celestial path. Even Lingyun's sect only had a few drops of it. The color and aura were unmistakable. The amount of this ball of magnificent spirit jade marrow was probably 20 times more than what Lingyun's sect gave him. Without hesitation, Zhong Shou stepped into the formation in front of him. This stage should be a test of his attainments in spiritual formations. Although his formation path wasn't that good, its standard was still decent. Such spiritual patterns and restrictions that weren't hidden were what he liked the most. The 9 bloodlines of the dragon race were famous for not being good at formations. This place wasn't too difficult. He didn't need to use mind stones to break through. Just by looking, he could see the truth. After the world viewing platform, his formation path skills seemed to have improved. When he walked out of the vast habitat, he noticed it. At this moment, this feeling was even clearer. He already knew the foundations of the Grand Path. These laws were naturally much easier to understand in his eyes. He strode forwards. Not a single bit of starlight was drawn down. After 100 steps, he slowly caught up to the purple-masked Taoist. That Taoist slowly became anxious and quickened his footstep. However, he triggered more restrictions and many streaks of starlight shot down. It caused his body to nearly stumble. At this moment, outside the formation, a person appeared. It was Fongming. When he saw that the two of them were already at the middle and back of the formation, his brows furrowed slightly. Then, he calmed down and walked into the formation. He wasn't rushed nor slow, not arrogant nor rash. However, his speed was a little faster than Zhong Shou. 60 more steps and Zhong Shou was already side by side with that Taoist. He was about to reach the end and was less than 10 steps away from the magnificent spirit jade marrow. Zhong Shou was about to exceed him. That purple-masked Taoist couldn't take it anymore and sped up once more. The first 4 steps were still fine. However, when he took the 5th step, for some reason, he triggered the restrictions once more. This time, there were tens and hundreds of starlight in the sky that struck down. That purple-masked Taoist's expression instantly turned ashen white. He didn't dare to move forwards, raising a golden shield to cover the sky above his head to block the starlight strikes. Zhong Shou grinned when he saw that and casually walked over. He was about to easily keep that ball of magnificent spirit jade marrow. Chapter 509. Put it down. Just as the magnificent spirit jade marrow was about to be kept into Zhong Shou's sleeve, a cold scoff sounded out. That purple-faced Taoist finally took the sky full of starlight. One of the golden shields was completely shattered. His body and arms were covered in injuries. However, he still wasn't willing to stop for even a moment. A sword stabbed over, the silver-white sword shadow scattered like falling leaves as it swept towards Zhong Shou. However, before he took 4 steps, he touched the changing spiritual pattern restrictions. Another 10 streaks of starlight struck down. Zhong Shou's lips curled up in a mocking manner, the broken tan sword in his hand slashing out. The sword Qian instantly covered 1,000 feet and broke into the sword light. Kung! With a light cry, the 2 powerful martial intents collided violently. Following which there was a loud explosion as Zhong Shou took half a step back. That purple-faced Taoist's face was ashen white. The sword shadow in front of him was suddenly scattered. That silver-white sword light followed behind, like a bird entering the forest, piercing through the dense sword shadow. It was still able to pass through with ease. Following those gaps and tracing back to the source, in an instant, it had already reached his throat and the space between his brows. Crossing 10 steps of space, it was unstoppable. In 1,000th of a second, it was right in front of his eyes. With a low scoff, a thread of blood spurted out from the purple-faced Taoist's neck. His body retreated unwillingly, avoiding that sharp sword light. In that instance, he touched dozens of restrictions behind him. He could only look on as this ball of magnificent spirit jade marrow was kept by Zhong Shou into his heaven and earth bag. At this moment, another 100 streaks of starlight smashed down. The purple-faced Taoist gritted his teeth and shot out a few grade 2 talismans to protect his body. Then, he tried his best to block the starlight strikes, saying coldly, "Cultivator Fong Ming, please help me. If we can get back that magnificent spirit jade marrow, we will split it half." Fong Ming was startled. He hesitated for a moment, as if he was weighing the pros and cons. In the end, he smiled towards Zhong Shou, a glow flashing in his eyes. "Your Highness Zhong Shou, just now you were able to obtain this magnificent spirit jade marrow because Brother Shangyue went all out to block the restriction starlight. Since the 2 of you work together, why don't we split it equally?" The purple-faced Death Moon Taoist was delighted. Zhong Shou looked over and saw that although Fong Ming was smiling, his tone was really sincere. However, his expression was filled with an inexplicable chill. He found it funny. What did the restriction starlight above have to do with him? Shang Yu was in too much of a hurry to activate the restrictions of the spiritual array. He had lost his composure and reaped what he sowed. Previously, when he attacked Zhong Shou with his sword, he did not hold back at all. This had crossed Zhong Shou's bottom line. From Fong Ming's tone, it was as if it was all thanks to Shang Ming that he was able to obtain the magnificent spirit jade marrow. As expected of the righteous Fong Ming, Mr. Fong, a light laugh rang out in the air. Just as the 2 of them were confused, Zhong Shou's hand. Suddenly, a few strands of silver light that were like clouds and mist flashed into appearance, and they struck directly towards Deathcry. Tens of steps were crossed in just a moment. Only when they were a few steps away from Death Moon did the 2 of them clearly see what was in front of them. Flying knife. A total of 5-inch-long blades of light pounced straight at him. Fang Ming instantly thought back to a rumor regarding Zhong Shou. Death Moon felt his head explode, his body shuddering. He instinctively retreated. Sword shadows flashed as many talismans shot out. Forcefully blocking the streaks of light from above, he was able to change directions according to his will. Compared to the swords of sword cultivators, the flying knives were even sharper and faster. They were also heavier and fiercer. Just as the last flying knife was about to be broken by him, Zhong Shou's sword broke through the air at that moment. Instant space dragon sword. Flash. When the sword slashed out, the entire space seemed to have frozen. Only that bright blade light was shining and striking. Just as Death Moon was extremely nervous and was prepared to go all out to block that sword disappeared in front of his eyes. The sword light suddenly disappeared before his eyes, and in the next instant, it was already at his throat. Before the blade entered his body, the sharp sword energy had already smashed his neck and spine. His head and body separated from his body and fell down from the air. Then, the sky full of starlight charged down. Shang Yu's corpse was smashed into dust. Zhong Shou's broken tan sword also returned to its sheath. Like nothing had happened, he waved his sleeves. Cultivator Fang, he is already gone. Do we still want to split this magnificent spirit jade marrow? At this moment, Fang Ming had just arrived roughly 10 steps behind Death Moon. He personally witnessed this spiritual grandmaster, who suppressed his aura to grade 7, die in front of him. First, he sucked in a cold breath. Then, he looked at Zhong Shou. Apart from being complicated, there was also some wariness. It seems like we really don't need to split it. His eyes were filled with regret. He had forgotten that he could only use grade 7 strength in such a place. Zhong Shou, who had the spiritual sword intent, was probably even more terrifying than when he had the 2 silver-armored paper men. He was like a fish in water in this place. If it was him, would he be able to take that sword? Zhong Shou grinned and kept Death Moon's heaven and earth bag into his hands. The wealth of a grade 9 spiritual grandmaster was indeed a little extraordinary. There were a total of 20 grade 9 beast crystals. However, maybe because he had consumed too much energy before, there weren't many spiritual talismans, and only 2 spiritual artifacts were destroyed. Apart from that were some spiritual pills unique to the Daoming sect. Naturally, there weren't any surprises like the 2 puppet spirit descending talismans. Using those grade 3 cloud flame flying knives that couldn't keep up with his footsteps to exchange for these things was worth it. In a year and a half, Zhong Shou had raised a total of 9 of these flying knives. Now his stock was empty. If he wanted to use this 6-god defensive knife technique, he would have to raise them from scratch. The newly crafted grade 6 cloud flame flying knives could be used just now. Fang Ming's face was alternating between green and white. Seeing that Zhong Shou was about to turn around and leave, he suddenly opened his mouth. I think your highness is a little too fierce and overbearing. This Death Moon is an elder of the Daoming sect, and you actually killed him just like that. It was the same with the Yuanshi demon sect. Like that sword Prince Jueyu, he was alone and naturally didn't fear anything. However, your highness still has Gantian Mountain dragging you down. Aren't you worried that these 2 sects will take revenge? Zhong Shou shook his head slightly, too lazy to bother as he stepped into the end of the spiritual formation. Did he have to tell Fang Ming that it was because he came from the Daoming sect which was why he didn't worry about killing him? This person was unlucky to bump into him when he came to this world, and his killing intent was the strongest. Not to mention offending him, even if he didn't offend him, he would take the initiative to head up and kick him. At this moment, his impression of Fang Ming wasn't much better. If he wasn't suppressing himself, he would have slashed out with his sword and asked Fang Ming whether he lived or died today. It was like he had stepped into a thin film. When he stepped over this paper-thin space barrier and stood still, Zhong Shou felt as if he had stepped into a thin film, only to see that in front of him was an extremely vast void. However, there were countless palaces within the void. There were tens of thousands of them, densely packed and scattered within. Based on what Yi Feishuang said, the dragon race would place some treasures that they could give to juniors and set up a corresponding test. If one passed, one would be able to get it. If not, then it would be a consolation prize. However, each item in the hall would become more and more difficult to obtain. Each time was harder than the last. In theory, this legacy land could be filled with unlimited items. It could be taken out without a limit, but until now, even the most talented dragon clan had not been able to take out the 8th spiritual object. Just as Zhong Shou was looking into the distance, Fang Ming, who was behind him, stepped through the thin veil and entered this space. He glanced at Zhong Shou, like he felt that this teen was too dangerous. Without hesitation, he walked towards another direction. Although he was grade 9 after suppressing his cultivation, he felt really dangerous beside Zhong Shou, like he could lose his life at any moment. The way he looked at him also felt a little weird, like he was treating him as meat on the chopping block, judging where to slice him. Zhong Shou didn't bother about him, looking around and comparing it with the legacy memory that Yi Feishuang gave him. He shook his head. 14,000 years, the changes here were too huge, and it didn't match at all. It seemed like he had to search for those few items himself. The legacy test of the dragon race was really human-like. From the entrance of the hall, they could see what exactly was inside. As for whether or not one could recognize it, that was another matter. One could choose any hall and enter to challenge it. If one didn't need it, one wouldn't enter by mistake. Zhong Shou stepped into the air, casually strolling with his hands by his side. Looking out, the shock in his eyes became thicker and thicker. The riches of the dragon race weren't just for show. Heaven, Earth, Xian, Huang, grade 4, none of the spiritual items here were lower than Xian grade. The tools and pills were all at the magical grade. Even if its grade was slightly lower, it still had its own ingenuity and was extremely practical. Zhong Shou looked around like he was looking at flowers on horseback. Along with the magnificent spirit jade marrow, he had obtained a total of 5 items. There were still 2 items that he cared about the most. One was the God Realm Evil Dragon Pellet and the other was the Dragon Spirit Blood Birth Pellet. Although he had the energy accumulating fountain in his hands, Zhong Shou felt that it was best if he could get it on the way. Hearing Yi Feishuang's tone, this spiritual pellet seemed really special. Since it could be used to heal injuries like the essence accumulating fountain, then who knows, it might be of some use to Aokuan. Thinking about it, Zhong Shou slowly walked to the front of a jade white hall. Pretty much mechanically, he looked into the hall. In the next instance, Zhong Shou's eyes opened wide, only to see that in the center of the hall there was a crystal core. The moment he saw it, Xiao Jin, who was on his arm, became restless and pounced in that direction. Zhong Shou was really quick, grabbing little gold in midair. Then, he broke out into a laugh. Luck, it is actually a high celestial realm Wanxiang crystal core. Chapter 510. Luck, it is actually a celestial realm high-grade Wanxiang crystal core. When Wanxiang beasts were alive, they didn't have a fixed crystal core and were constantly changing. Only when they died would a crystal form. However, it wouldn't be as firm as normal beast crystals. Instead, it felt like a resin that had solidified. At this moment, Zhong Shou was sure that what was in front of him was left behind by a god-beast level Wanxiang after it died. He could feel the impatience and desire from little gold. Zhong Shou was also surprised, taking in a deep breath to suppress it. Little fellow, don't be impatient. Patting little gold's head, Zhong Shou looked carefully at the situation within the hall. After analyzing the spiritual formation restrictions within, a moment later, Zhong Shou comprehended something. Then, he didn't hesitate to step in. The moment he stepped into the palace, the doors to the palace closed with a loud bang. In front of him, a blurry human shadow appeared. It actually looked like Zhong Shou, and it was becoming more and more real. As expected, since it was the crystal core of a god-beast Wanxiang, then the test here had to have something to do with the Wanxiang's transformation ability. What he had to face was most probably a projection of himself. He waited quietly, waiting for the features of the image to become clearer and clearer. Just as the entire image was about to be completed, the changes suddenly stopped. Then, Zhong Shou's mouth was agape as he looked at the simulated image of Zhong Shou twisting, collapsing, and gathering once more. It can't be simulated? Why is it like this? Looking carefully, the spiritual formation restrictions within the hall didn't have any flaws. However, after more than 10 simulations, the figure still collapsed. The spiritual formation within the stone hall was slowly collapsing. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed slightly. Then, he suddenly came to his senses and thought about the energy of the absolute beginning that he couldn't restrict. There was also the ball of sapphire blue light in the core of his soul sea. If it was as expected, the reason why the spiritual formation in the stone hall couldn't successfully replicate him was because of these two reasons. If it was a true Wanxiang, it would have stopped by itself. However, this spiritual formation that had no ability to think, although it used the Wanxiang crystal core as its core, it didn't have any intelligence. Moments later, the image in front of Zhong Shou totally disappeared. Only a few remnants of the spiritual formation within the hall were left. Zhong Shou was speechless. To think that he was so eager to try and carefully prepare for so long. Who knew that this test question would be solved so easily? He didn't need to do anything. Casually reaching out and grabbing the Wanxiang crystal core that lost its protection. Taking a close look, little gold, little Zhong Shou's, little Zhong Shou. Little Zhong, little gold, little gold, little gold. It wasn't easy to swallow and digest this celestial realm level Wanxiang crystal core. Without 3 to 5 months of time, he wouldn't be able to solve the outer layer. This little thing would probably have to sleep for a long period of time. Turning around and leaving, Zhong Shou continued to search. At this moment, a few more people appeared in this space. Zhong Yuan was among them, making Zhong Shou slightly shocked. Who knows how he passed the starlight formation in the 5th stage? He seemed to be focused on searching for something and couldn't come over, only bowing from afar. Zhong Shou looked over and didn't bother much. Time wasn't enough, even a breath of time was precious. This wasn't the time to talk. Just as Zhong Shou was in front of the 3420th stone hall, a voice rang out. His eyes lit up, and without any hesitation, he stepped into the room. Within this stone hall was the God Realm Dragon pellet. It was golden yellow in color and hung in mid-air, giving off an eye-piercing light. It was only the size of a coal ball, but on its surface, there were many mysterious runes that flashed. Within the spiritual light that spread out, there seemed to be long ink swimming within. The moment Zhong Shou stepped into the hall, he was shocked. He instantly felt a vast dragon aura press down on him. With each step he took, he felt the pressure get heavier. This stage is to go against the pressure of this God Realm True Dragon? The God Realm True Dragon wasn't here. At this moment, there was only the remnant aura on the dragon pellet. However, it was still extremely overbearing and majestic. Legend has it that the dragon race is the king of all beasts in the world. Their natural bloodline can suppress the various races. It is also said that there are 9 types of true dragons, each one represents a path of heaven and earth. After End Realm, they can even be compared to the path itself. These words aren't exaggerated at all. Zhong Shou clenched his fist. He could clearly sense that this dragon pellet had already cut off all the metal element spiritual energy here. It caused the spiritual energy to be totally cut off from his connection with it. Scoffing coldly, Zhong Shou continued to step forwards. Similarly, a strong martial path intent rose up. Out of all the sword intents, the one he comprehended the deepest was the 9-long-ing sword. That day on Dragon-Gathering Mountain, he directly comprehended the sword's soul intermediate realm. Looking at the scenes of the absolute beginning, he seemed to have improved a lot. At this moment, he was going all out against it. Behind Zhong Shou, 9 long-ing dragons of different shapes appeared. Pretty much each step, there was a long-ing dragon that turned from illusionary to real. Platinum Dragon, Greenwood Dragon, Lightning Dragon, Mysterious Een Dragon, Blazing Flame Dragon, Instant Space Dragon, Mysterious Yellow Dragon, Chill Hornless Dragon. When each dragon image turned from illusionary to real, they roared and circled around. On Zhong Shou's body, the sword shadow that had turned into real form became even more condensed. Going up against the dragon aura, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. However, his entire body seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure, and ghastly wounds continuously appeared on his body. Zhong Shou didn't care at all, like those wounds weren't on his body. When the 9 dragon shadows suddenly gathered in one place and turned into the shape of a sword, the 9 dragon shadows suddenly appeared. Zhong Shou had already taken the last step and arrived in front of the dragon pellet. The sword aura was so strong that at this moment it was actually the one that took the initiative. His 9-9 dragon shadow sword intent had actually suppressed the dragon's might by a notch. Without any emotions, he looked at the dragon pellet that had dimmed down. Zhong Shou flicked his finger and instantly the entire spiritual formation collapsed. As for the dragon core, after it was freed from its restraints, it immediately turned into a golden light and flew out of the hall. Just a dead thing, where do you think you can fly to? With a soul power move, he tightly bound the dragon pellet. However, this item was still struggling fiercely, going against his soul power. However, when Zhong Shou used a sword intent to suppress it, it was extremely powerful. He then shot out many spiritual talismans and finally managed to bind the God Realm dragon pellet and keep it into his sleeve. When he stepped out of the hall, Zhong Shou frowned and looked at his body. He was covered in blood and wounds. Even if he consumed several grade 8 spiritual pills, he was still unable to heal them. This was just on the surface. His internal organs were heavily injured, all of them deformed from the pressure and were close to breaking apart. However, these injuries weren't caused by the dragon aura. It was his own body that was unable to endure the martial Tao insight at the level of sword soul, and it was an injury caused by it. As expected, if one's internal energy doesn't reach grade 7, there won't be any changes. The strength of my physical body is still a little lacking. After sighing, Zhong Shou thought back to what Yi Feishuang had said before. In the 10,000 years of the dragon race, no one was able to obtain the 8th spiritual item. Of this, each time was stronger than the last. Each time he obtained an item, the following tests would be a little stronger. Compared to how relaxed he was at the start, this time he was in a slightly bad state. Even he didn't dare to say that he would be able to obtain more. Looking out once more, he saw that for some reason, Zhong Yuan was in an intense battle with someone. Zhong Shou looked over and then his eyes squinted dangerously. Yuanshi Demon Sect? This time, only one person from the Yuanshi Demon Sect entered the true legacy land of the dragon race. He was also a grade 9, holding a black wooden sword as he stood on a spell altar. 30,000 feet away, he controlled 3 grade 7 spirit beasts to trap Zhong Shou. In this legacy land, everyone's cultivation was suppressed to grade 7. Even spirit masters could only use grade 7 and above protector beasts here. At this moment, those 3 grade 7 spirit beasts weren't Zhong Yuan's territory. At any moment, they would be in danger of being destroyed by Zhong Yuan. That Yuanshi Demon Sect Day Wandering Spirit Master seemed to know about Zhong Yuan's strength, using these 3 spirit beasts to restrict him. He himself was on the spell altar, casting spells from afar. a Xian gold turtle whose strength was suppressed to grade 7 by a secret technique, didn't leave his side. Zhong Yuan stood in the distance and walked step by step in the direction of the spell altar. Around him, various strong spells were cast one after another. However, the moment they formed, they were broken by his lightning spear intent. He couldn't be said to be free and easy, but his expression was really calm, just that it was a little tiring. Near the two of them, there were 3 people looking on. Fang Ming was one of them, their eyes flashing with a weird glow. Zhong Shou's brows rose up, following which he laughed coldly. He held the broken tan sword in his hand as he silently walked towards the spell altar. That surging killing intent was also completely retracted. His aura was also retracted to the extreme. It was like he didn't exist as he slowly walked closer. The other people didn't notice anything, but Fang Ming suddenly frowned. Then, he smiled, his body flashing in between Zhong Yuan and the spell altar. He waved his sleeves, directly dissipating a streak of fire. Cultivator Luoming, there are so many spiritual items here. Why do we have to harm our relationship because of such a small thing? We still have a lot of time left, let's search carefully. What we lose in the east, we gain in the west. Your Highness Zhong Shou, what do you think? Luoming was originally furious when he was stopped, his eyes filled with unhappiness. Now that Fang Ming reminded him, he was shocked. Chapter 511. Looking back, Luoming saw a young man behind him, holding a shining sword. He was already 1,000 feet away from him without any sound at all. That appearance was something that he had seen in the spacious stone hall outside. It was Gantian Mountain's Zhong Shou, the monster king who used his own strength to cause all the sects present to be speechless. He immediately felt a chill run down his spine. He controlled the spell altar and flew 10,000 feet up to avoid the attack. They allowed the 3 protector beasts in the distance to be instantly killed by Zhong Yuan. Zhong Shou frowned and looked up at the sky. He didn't bother to hide his killing intent anymore. The 9 long heads behind him circled around his throat, shaking the sky. However, just as he was about to make his move, a voice suddenly rang out. Luoming, who was above, tossed out several talismans. A few blood-colored light covered his body and the spell altar. Devil Blood Rainbow Talisman. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed slightly, but his killing intent burned even brighter. He knew that this talisman had to select 10 people to practice a special technique. Once his strength reached a certain level, he would then extract the blood essence from his heart. Only by using this blood as ink could one draw such a demonic talisman. It was said that for every rank of power, it would require 10 more people's blood essence. It was a top talisman technique of the demonic sect. Just one of them was equivalent to a defensive spiritual artifact of the 3rd stage of the same rank, and they could be stacked. This Luoming had used 4 7th-order demonic blood rainbow talismans and 280 lives. He really thought highly of Lin Ming. The 9-legged Long Ing suddenly changed again. The Platinum Dragon, Thunder Dragon, and Fire Dragon all rushed into the broken autumn sword in Zhong Shou's hand. Then, a Long Ing with a different shape than the 9 types of true dragons suddenly charged out from the sword. Flames and lightning intertwined around its silver-white body. It looked a little similar to the giant dragon statue at the entrance of the Dragon Hall. After that, it opened its bloody mouth and roared at Luoming. Zhong Shou also stepped into the void, rising step by step. The sword aura was drawn but not released, firmly locking down Luoming. Just as the killing intent was about to reach its peak, Fang Ming's figure suddenly appeared in front of him and said with a smile, "Your Highness Zhong Shou, please calm down. It's just a misunderstanding. Why must we fight to the death over such a small matter?" Zhong Shou raised his eyebrows and stopped in his tracks, thinking that this Fang Ming really didn't know what was good for him. He was already thinking in his heart, should he kill this person as well? On the other side, Fang Ming did not know what Zhong Shou was thinking. However, looking at the expression of the young man in front of him, he knew that Zhong Shou wasn't willing. He smiled. The grievances between the two of you have nothing to do with me. However, you shouldn't fight here. What if you activate the restrictions of this legacy land and send all of us out? What should we do then? The moment he said this, the brows of the few people who were watching from afar furrowed, their eyes filled with unhappiness. Zhong Shou wasn't afraid, but when Fang Ming said that, he felt a little depressed. As expected from the righteous Mr. Fang Ming. Just a few words and he became the target of everyone. The killing intent in his heart didn't disappear at all. He was only thinking about whether or not the battle with Luo Ming would activate the spiritual formation of this legacy land. Based on Yi Feishuang's memories, this place was indeed not allowed to fight. As Fang Ming said this, it turned into a sigh. Today's matter is indeed Brother Luo Ming's fault. How about this? Brother Luo Ming apologizes to this little brother, and we'll let this matter rest. We don't have much time left here, so peace is the most important thing. Luo Ming stood on the spell altar. His face was dark and uncertain. He wanted to not bother about anything and directly wave his sleeves to leave. However, Zhong Shou's sword intent locked onto him. That bright sword seemed like it was going to slash down on the spell altar at any moment. He had a feeling of extreme danger. Even if it was him, with the 4 demon blood rainbow talismans in front of him, he might not be able to block it. He felt really frustrated. If it was some other place, he wouldn't be in such a bad state. A few grade 9 protector beasts going all out, along with his spells, he might be able to win. The 2 protectors that the sect arranged for him weren't here. After weighing the pros and cons, he looked at Fang Ming, who gave him a hurrying gaze. Samurai was slowly getting impatient. Luo Ming's heart sunk slightly in the end. He said, "Today it is my fault, I shouldn't have attacked." Saying these words was already the limit of his ability. Luo Ming's old face swelled up and turned blood red. He didn't have any face left, directly turning into a light and charging into a stone hall in the distance. Only then did Fang Ming smile, bowing towards Zhong Shou in a friendly manner before leaving. The 2 people who were watching from afar also didn't say a word, leaving on their own. Zhong Yuan kept silent, tens of thousands of feet away from Zhong Shou. Only at this moment did he step to the side of Zhong Shou. "I was rash and caused trouble for your highness." He knew that people like Luo Ming were arrogant and could suppress an area in the cloud world. At this moment, he was forced to admit defeat in front of the 2 of them. Even if Luo Ming could bear with it, the Yuanshi demon sect behind him definitely couldn't. This time, it could be said that there were many hidden troubles, and it was far from complete. At this moment, Zhong Shou only felt a headache. However, when he heard Zhong Yuan's words, he couldn't help but laugh. "It isn't much of a problem, sooner or later we will have to fight." In Donglin Cloud Continent, a large half of the demon path sects were under the protection of the Yuanshi demon sect. He definitely had to chase these powers out of Donglin. On the other hand, that Fang Ming made him a little annoyed. This time, this person won half a round. He managed to protect Luo Ming's life. "Alright, Zhong Yuan, what did you get this time? To cause Luo Ming to fight with you for it?" Zhong Yuan smiled when he heard that, not explaining. He took out a thick scripture from his sleeves and passed it over. Zhong Shou took it and flipped it open, following which he broke out into a laugh. "So that is the case, no wonder that fellow would go all out against you." Written on the book were the words Purple Yuan Lightning Extreme Art. It was actually an Earth-level lightning-type cultivation technique. However, when he flipped it open, half of it was empty. There was a black pearl the size of a longan hidden within. Black in color, it gave out a strong demon aura. However, it was suppressed by a weird power within the book. This was the Darkness Demon Relic. In Zhong Shou's memory, this item appeared a total of 7 times in the God Emperor game, all of different grades. However, all of them created a tyrannical demonic path expert. Compared to this item, this purple essence lightning extreme technique seemed really ordinary. The only thing that was different was that this cultivation technique allowed both human and dragon race cultivators to rest. There was also one more technique within the purple essence endless spear, which was really exquisite. Zhong Yuan's physical body cultivated the insight mysterious lightning body training art. His internal energy also cultivated the purple cloud mysterious lightning path Dao technique. The former was given to him by Wei Su. The latter was a grade 10 Saint Spirit internal cultivation technique that he exchanged for with 650,000 merit points from the Technique Teaching Pavilion. He took this purple essence lightning extreme technique to use as a reference. Who knew that he would obtain this darkness demon relic? That dragon race 10,000 years ago most probably didn't know about the mysteries within the book and casually tossed it here. Who knows how this Luoming found out about this matter, but Zhong Yuan was a step ahead of him. He sighed in his heart. As expected, this matter wouldn't end so easily. Taking revenge for being humiliated twice along with this darkness demon relic, the Yuanshi demon sect most probably wouldn't let this matter rest. Thinking about it seriously, Zhong Shou temporarily placed this matter aside, asking curiously, "How did you enter this time?" The illusionary realm was easy to break, but that starlight spiritual formation wasn't so easy. Zhong Yuan pointed to the east. It was the stone hall that Luoming had entered. I followed him in, just half a step away. Zhong Shou was startled when he heard that, following which he laughed out loud. He thought to himself that Luoming probably really wanted to eat Zhong Yuan alive. Helplessly, he brought him in, but it was Zhong Yuan who snatched this heaven demon relic first. "Then do you want to try and take a few more spiritual items?" Zhong Yuan shook his head. "It is important to know one's place and know how to be content. Zhong Yuan can just take one more, who knows whether or not he can smoothly get it. I estimate that at most he has a 20% chance. That might not be the case. 14,000 years, no one is taking care of the spiritual formation of the legacy land of the dragon race. It might be possible." As Zhong Shou said that, he sighed. Compared to Zhong Yuan, he was the type of person who didn't know where he was and wasn't content. After casually saying a few words, Zhong Shou and Zhong Yuan separated. The heaven demon relic was taken over. If this item was in Zhong Yuan's hands, it would only cause problems for him. He searched around once more, but this time, Zhong Shou didn't see any signs of that dragon spirit blood birth pill. 3 hours later, like the wind, he looked through all 23,400 stone halls in this legacy land, but he still didn't find anything. He couldn't help but frown, knowing that either Yi Feishuang's legacy memory was wrong, or the dragon spirit blood birth pill had already been taken by someone else. Luckily, he already had the energy accumulating essence fountain. If not, he wouldn't know how to answer to Yi Feishuang. Thinking about it for a moment, Zhong Shou decided to give up. His body flashed and he arrived in front of another hall door. What was hidden within the hall wasn't anything else. It was actually 3 golden pages. When Zhong Shou first looked at it, he felt that it was really familiar. He had seen these golden pages once. They were really similar to the pages in the Mysterious Life Golden Book. Speaking of which, the Tsang Sheng Dao had already existed 14,000 years ago. However, why would the pages of the Golden Book be here? If it was as he guessed, then it was okay. If it wasn't, then this time he was going to suffer a huge loss. Stopping for a moment, Zhong Shou still stepped in. Just as the door to the palace closed, rays of sword qi suddenly appeared out of thin air within the palace. Zhong Shou's eyes were filled with joy. Sword duel? He loved that the most. Chapter 512. Within the stone hall, threads of sword shadows appeared and disappeared, flashing about. At this moment, Zhong Shou's back was covered in sweat. His face was ashen white. This was already 13,243 swords. Before this, when he took the dragon pellet, the injuries he suffered were slowly worsening. These sword shadows still didn't stop, like they were endless. This battle was far more tiring than the one with Juyu. The illusory sword shadows were a collection of 7 different sword arts. Almost every one of them was at least at the 8th level of the earth-shattering level. Moreover, every single sword intent had already surpassed intent and reached the soul level. The Longing sword was polished by him in this battle to the point where he could use it freely, reaching a godly level. His physical body was trained by the sword energy. Although it was covered in wounds, it would improve in the future. However, Zhong Shou couldn't see any hope of winning this battle. If it was like this 14,000 years later, then it would have been even stronger 14,000 years ago. Yi Feishuang said that in this legacy land, even the most talented dragon race wouldn't be able to bring out the 8th spiritual item. Now, he really believed it. The sword light still pressed over bit by bit. A moment ago it was the vast energy sword, the next moment it changed to the great ice sword, and the next moment it was the lightning prison sword. It made Zhong Shou feel tired dealing with it. He was also filled with doubt. If the name recorded on the 3 pages of the mysterious Golden Life book was really Tsang Xingdao Sr., he was most probably good at the sword path and was a top sword expert. He couldn't be distracted and didn't think about how much time was left before the legacy land closed. Zhong Shou only knew how to go all out with his sword to fight for every bit of time, to adjust his meridians and recover his internal energy. He tried his best to preserve more strength to deal with the sword wave behind. Slowly, he forgot about the time and where he was. He also didn't think about the 3 pages of the mysterious Golden Life book. His thoughts were pure, only the sword in his hand and in front of his eyes were continuously forming and slashing over from all directions. It was as if each sword was stronger than the previous one, and each sword was more ingenious than the previous one. Just as Zhong Shou counted to the 21,200th sword, Zhong Shou's eyes lit up. The sword qi that filled the sky finally subsided. Meanwhile, Zhong Shou was drenched in sweat. His footsteps were unsteady, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. His legs went soft, and only by using his sword to support himself did he not collapse. At first, he smiled helplessly, but in the end, he felt a burst of joy. This battle was truly refreshing. Compared to the battle with Juyu, it left a deeper impression on him. The 7 types of sword techniques at the sword soul level allowed his mastery of the Long-Ing sword to be raised to the extreme. As for the incomplete One Origin sword, which was full of flaws, he didn't even dare to use it in this battle. Shaking his head, Zhong Shou consumed several medicinal pills in succession. After the aura in his body recovered slightly, Zhong Shou stepped onto the stone steps deep within the hall. He didn't take a close look and directly kept the 3 golden pages into his sleeve. Then, he took large strides and walked out of the door of the stone palace, looking around, only to see that there was no one around. Who knows if they had already left or if they were still in some stone hall solving those tough questions. Only Zhong Yuan was still there, calmly guarding outside the stone hall. Zhong Shou took a look and then smiled. "Did you get it?" Zhong Yuan nodded his head, flipping his hand and taking out another item. It was 9 pills. Zhong Shou took a close look, and then his eyes lit up. So it is the intent accumulating pill. What good luck! The so-called intent accumulating pill was when the person who refined the pill used the spiritual pill as a support to store his martial path intent within the pill. And the person who consumed it, besides being able to use it to comprehend a high-level martial intent, they could also borrow the martial intent within the pill to fight with others. The 9 pills in Zhong Yuan's hand were peak intent accumulating pills, and they already had a spiritual feeling. What was rare was that 3 of them were related to lightning. This luck was indeed not bad. Even Zhong Shou was envious. He did obtain many things after entering this legacy land. However, apart from the magnificent spirit jade marrow, there was nothing that could increase his strength. Zhong Yuan didn't make a sound, but he nodded his head in agreement. Zhong Shou calculated the time, and then his brows furrowed once more. Unknowingly, it was already the last day. Only 8 minutes left. Looking around, Zhong Shou made up his mind. With such a short amount of time left, he didn't force himself to obtain the 9th spiritual item. However, there was no harm in taking a look. His eyes locked onto a pale gold stone hall not far away. He had seen before that what was hidden within the hall was a flying shuttle the size of a baby's arm. It was also the thing he was most interested in this region. His body flashing, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to flash to the front of the hall. The moment he stepped in, the doors closed. The spiritual formation restrictions within the hall shone with a spiritual light. What was activated wasn't a path technique or a sword technique. Instead, it was many giant black winged bats. Their gazes were fierce and cold, filled with a bloodthirsty intent. However, in his eyes there was more of a loss. Zhong Shou sucked in a cold breath. Who knows where these beasts teleported over from? Pretty much every one of them was grade 9. Looking out, there were a total of 800 of them circling the wide hall. Zhong Shou's mouth was filled with bitterness. The difficulty of the test to obtain the 9th spiritual item was just too sick. 800 grade 9 beasts, this was really going to kill him. At this moment, there were less than 60 breaths left until the legacy land closed. Zhong Shou wasn't worried. As long as he could survive the initial period, he would be automatically teleported out. In the next moment, Zhong Shou had an idea and was deep in thought. Less than 60 breaths? Looking at the winged bats in the hall, a portion of them were ferociously pouncing over. He heard that the winged bats were ferocious beasts whose vision was really short. They relied on their eardrums to hear, and their spiritual senses were really sharp. They all had sound element abilities. Sometimes they were used to attack, but most of the time they were used to scout the land and living beings to search for prey. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed slightly, following which he smiled. What was the harm in taking a gamble? His divine soul was in turmoil. Then, one black and one white, two totally opposite Dharma idols appeared outside of his body. Instantly, half of the stone hall was dark and lightless, while the other half was eye-catching, unable to be seen. All sound, all spiritual senses were twisted. Within the stone hall, there were more than 800 winged bats. At this moment they were in complete chaos. Zhong Shou laughed coldly. His body flashed once more, passing through the hundreds of winged bats, using his fastest speed to pounce into the depths of the hall. When he was in front of the golden shuttle, he reached out with his hand. First, he felt a special ability, and then the spiritual formation restrictions were activated. In the next instance, the black and white holes messed it up. With a light grasp, the golden shuttle was already in Zhong Shou's hands. When his soul power was nearly used up, the black and white hole dermas were about to disappear. Zhong Shou shot out dozens of body-protecting spiritual talismans. Dozens of layers of spiritual light protected him. When all the light and shadows returned to normal, Zhong Shou saw that the 800 winged bats were all furious. In their panic, they all subconsciously sent out a vast sound wave that surged in all directions. Without the black hole to absorb, the sound waves could only reverberate and shake within the stone hall, charging all about. The dozens of body-protecting spells around Zhong Shou were instantly broken by a large half. He replenished them one by one, not caring about the cost. Those hundreds of black winged bats were in an even worse state. A full 860 sound waves, comparable to a grade 9 ability, were all stacked together. Power was so majestic that it could even compare to the highest grade spells. Pretty much right away, close to half of the winged bats were unable to defend and were blown into pieces, turning into meat and blood. Zhong Shou's heart felt pained when he saw that. Not only were there no corpses left, but even their beast crystals were also unable to remain as they exploded into pieces. The remaining winged bats weren't in a good state either. They went all out to block the sound waves that reverberated around. In the next instant, another burst of spiritual light flashed within the palace. Zhong Shou's body was directly teleported out of the stone hall. When he looked out once more, those black winged bats were nowhere to be seen. They returned to the stone steps that they had entered the hall from. The hall doors in the distance were tightly shut. Startled, Zhong Shou felt so much pain that he wished he was dead. In just 3 more breaths, those remaining winged bats would all be wiped out. When the sound waves calmed down, there would be many grade 9 beast crystals left. In just 3 breaths, he had lost huge amounts. His face was originally ashen white and now it was even uglier. Yi Feishuang, Yi Feiyan, Ruoshui, and Chu Shui were all teleported out. When they found Zhong Shou, they were startled. Yi Feishuang instinctively thought that he had gained very little this time. She consoled, "Your Highness, you don't have to be sad. Who knows how many heroes were unable to enter the Legacy Land because the time was too short. Just now, I saw that out of the 30 cultivators, 2 of them weren't even able to break through the illusionary realm." When Zhong Shou heard that, he felt the same way, nodding his head. The time was indeed too short, we lost a lot this time. A total of 20,000 Xian grade spiritual items, your dragon race is really rich. While he said that, he kept the golden flying shuttle into his sleeves. His expression was really dejected. Yi Feishuang was about to reply, but in the next instance, her pupils constricted. Her breathing became heavy as she looked at the item in Zhong Shou's hand. Royal Demon God Shuttle? You got the Royal Demon God Shuttle? Following which she thought back to Zhong Shou's eyes, her mind was at a loss. 9? You said that you got a total of 9? At this moment, she really wanted to kill this fellow with one sword. Even that Fongming, the 2 grade 9 experts of Tailing Sect and Yuanshi Demon Sect, only got 7. This fellow had already obtained 9 items, yet he was still pretending to be like this. On the other side, Yi Feiyan's eyes shone brightly as she looked at Zhong Shou in worship. Chapter 513. So it was him, he was actually sealed in the 3rd Dragon Hall. Zhong Shouxin's heart sunk and he knew what Ao Kuan meant. This dragon pellet most probably didn't belong to Ao Kuan. Actually, this was expected. The reason why he took it was because he had a bit of hope. Sighing slightly, Zhong Shou's expression returned to normal. Did Brother Ao recognize the owner of this dragon pellet? I do. Ao Kuan nodded his head, not dejected at all. He just sighed. We were both listed as evil dragons and also God Realm. However, the difference between us was huge. This person was sealed because he wanted to be outside of the 9 types of true dragons. He wanted to create a true dragon bloodline known as the Destruction Giant Dragon. In the end, he was just a step away from success. Unfortunately, before he took that step, many dragon race experts worked together to capture him. Ao Kuan, killed too much due to emotions and angered an end realm. There is a difference in realms and Ao Kuan can't compare to him. He smiled towards Zhong Shou. I have no use for this dragon pellet. If I forcefully merge with it, I won't be able to enter the Saint Realm. However, there are many destruction laws within. If it lands in the hands of a spirit realm or celestial realm expert, it would be a top treasure. Zhong Shou frowned. Destruction laws and Jueyu's great extinction sword walked the same path. If this dragon pellet could allow one to comprehend the destruction laws, then it was a top treasure. He didn't think much as Zhong Shou placed a small bottle in front of him. After opening the cork, a spiritual mist instantly rose up. Energy accumulating essence fountain? There is actually such a treasure in the 3rd Dragon Hall? Ao Kuan was shocked when he saw that. He then shook his head. If this energy-accumulating essence fountain is used to heal injuries, it would be a top spiritual item. However, it is useless for me to form my pellet again. Zhong Shou's face instantly dimmed and he felt slightly ashamed. Speaking of which, he had gained nothing in the third dragon hall. On the contrary, it was Aokuan who comforted him with a calm expression. Aokuan thanks your highness for your kind intentions. Actually, it is okay. I, Aokuan, have waited for tens of thousands of years, and I don't mind waiting a moment. There are still 7 years until the spiritual wave. Regardless of whether it's recondensing the core or finding the true place where my dragon core is sealed, there will always be a way. Whilst he said that, Zhong Shou looked around. As for you, why did you have so much lifespan reduced? Since your name is in the mysterious Golden Life Book and you are only 16 years old, your lifespan should be 2,000 years. This is absolute beginning energy? Zhong Yuan and Ruoshui were shocked as they looked over in shock. This was the first they knew that he didn't have much lifespan's life. His was long was a heaven's king's was heaven's master ses master. One's lifespan could be doubled. The world viewing instrument did not consume 940 years of lifespan, but 1,880 years of lifespan. Within the Dragon Hall, Zhong Shou was fortunate enough to see the opening of a world and the scenes of the absolute beginning. The price was these 1,800 years of lifespan. Who knows if it is a blessing or a curse? Aokuan was startled, a weird expression appeared in his eyes. Who knows if it was envy or regret? Whether it is a blessing or a curse will depend on whether your highness can step into the celestial realm before your lifespan is used up. But to us, it's something we can only dream of. Aokuan didn't know that the third Dragon Hall had the chance to view the scenes of the absolute beginning. You only used 1,800 years of lifespan? That is really worth it. He looked at the area in front of Zhong Shou. Just as he was about to say that, Zhong Shou gained a lot. His eyes turned serious as he focused on the jade pearl. Looking closely, Aokuan's face was filled with excitement and nervousness. He was actually a little impatient, reaching out with his hand and summoning the jade pearl into his hand. The outer jade shell was directly ignored by Aokuan. In his eyes there were only a few drops of blue spiritual liquid. Taishian pill returning liquid, it is actually the Taishian pill returning liquid. After muttering a few times, Aokuan actually laughed out loud. Who knew that I, Aokuan, would actually have a chance to rise up and reach the Saint Realm? Mingtse, you judged my life. You said that if I didn't subdue that person, I would definitely die. I would have no hope of reaching the Saint Realm. What about now? His voice shook the heavens. He couldn't suppress his laughter. Zhong Shou was startled and then looked towards Aokuan with a weird gaze. Just as he was thinking that this person had gone crazy, Zhong Shou suddenly stopped laughing. Aokuan suddenly stopped laughing. However, his eyes were still filled with excitement. Sorry. Aokuan lost his composure because this is the first time in these 8,000 years that Aokuan is so happy. Zhong Shou nodded his head in understanding. His eyes focused on the jade pearl in Aokuan's hand. He was curious. Could this item really help Aokuan form a dragon pellet? Also, who was the Mingtse that this person mentioned? This item is called a liquid, but it is actually a type of celestial pill. Not only can it help people like me form pellets, but it is also useful for you human cultivators. It is used to heal broken pellet. This Taishian pill returning liquid is a little less, but along with this destruction dragon pellet and energy accumulating essence fountain, it can help me heal my old injuries. As for Mingtse, he is called Mingtse, half Taoist and half Buddhist, a crazy old man who likes to trick people. In the future, you will naturally recognize him. Casually explaining a few sentences, Aokuan asked curiously, "Where did your highness get this item from?" Zhong Shou kept silent and didn't speak, deep in thought as he looked at Chu Shui, who was on the back of the chill gold tiger. He couldn't tell Ao Kuan that this brat swallowed the 3 remnant pages of the mysterious life golden book and then spat them out. That said, he now had a rough idea of what was going on. Ao Kuan looked at Chu Shui and thought about it seriously before saying, "So that is the case. Your Highness, please help me thank that senior of Tsang Xingdao. Say that I, Ao Kuan, am really grateful. It is hard to thank him with words. In the future, if you have any orders, I won't reject it." Zhong Shou smiled bitterly. As for who was the one who made Chu Shui enter the dream, he wasn't sure till now. Ao Kuan didn't pay much attention to this matter. Just as he was about to say something, his brows furrowed as he looked into the distance. "Those 2 girls from the Yi family have returned." Zhong Shou was startled, looking over, but he didn't see anything. He knew that his spiritual sense was far weaker than Ao Kuan's. He stopped looking, taking in a deep breath as he asked, "Brother Ao, was this Yi family really famous during the Cloud Desolate era?" "Of course. It was like thunder in my ears." Ao Kuan smiled and explained, "Your monster race all merged with the bloodline of a god beast in your human body. This Yi family ancestor felt that it wasn't easy for our dragon race to survive and that it was tough to have children. Using a dragon body to merge with human blood, during the Cloud Desolate era, it infuriated the dragon race and they were nearly sealed. However, looking at the situation, the children of this person aren't in a good situation." Zhong Shou was speechless, thinking to himself that this time he finally understood the foundations of the Yi family. The Yi family sisters were indeed in a tough situation. However, their elders should still be there. If not, Tsang Xingdao wouldn't have bothered to send him over to help Feiyan and Feishuang. "I have some relationship with their ancestor. However, it isn't convenient for me to meet these 2 juniors, so I will take my leave." As Ao Kuan said this, he didn't hesitate to keep the energy accumulating essence fountain. Just as he was about to break through the air, he suddenly recalled something and smiled as he turned his head. "I forgot to say. Longing, that old fellow has already returned. He is 10 worlds away and will arrive at any moment. He said that it is about Lingyun's sect and that you can be at ease." Zhong Shou's body instantly froze, his heart felt warm. However, he only gave a flat and Ao Kuan smiled and said, 49 days later, Ao Kuan will be able to form a dragon pellet and step into the Saint Realm. Thanks to you, I will most probably be able to grasp the path of destruction. At that time, I will be able to help you. Based on what I know, apart from 7 Spirit Sect, there aren't any Saint Realm venerables under the shrines. Even if there is, it isn't in my eyes. Just do whatever you want to do." Zhong Shou still gave a flat reply and didn't say anything more. Ao Kuan didn't mind, suddenly looking into the distance. "There are dozens of small fries looking for you. Do you want me to help you solve it?" When Zhong Shou heard this, a cold intent appeared in his eyes. Then, he calmed back down and smiled. "Since they are small fries, then I, Zhong Shou, will be able to deal with them. I need to trouble Brother Ao to help." Ao Kuan instantly laughed out loud and tore open the space. "Since that is the case, then don't. What you are planning is huge, be careful." When his voice landed, the space that was forcefully ripped open closed and Ao Kuan's body totally disappeared. Zhong Shou was deep in thought. Moments later, he came back to his senses. He casually tossed the night demon wings to Ruoshui. As for the other items, he also put them away. He placed the golden flying shuttle in front of his eyes. As expected, it was a flying ship, a grade 2 magical treasure. With some refinement, he could use it. Who knew how fast it was? Zhong Shou flicked his finger and a drop of essence blood seeped into it. Just as he cast out many spells to refine it, Feishuang and Feiyan had already returned. They were actually riding a giant ship that was 3,000 feet long and arrived in front of him in an instant. Feishuang jumped down from the ship and then frowned, Why are you all still here? I just saw the people from the primeval demon sect and the Daoming sect searching nearby. I estimate that they will be here in half an hour. She looked around curiously. I felt the aura of the dragon race. Why did it disappear? Yi Feiyan directly ran to Zhong Shou's side and pulled on his arm, saying anxiously, "Brother Shou, flee. Just now, I saw a few spiritual grandmasters and true image realm spirit masters. They are really amazing. Let's go." Zhong Shou was delighted. His heart felt slightly warm. He really didn't know what to say about these two girls. They could have left, they could have stayed out of this, but they had to run back to remind him. Although Yi Feishuang's personality was a little bad, she was a warm-hearted person. Nonsense. When have I, Zhong Shou, ever escaped? Frowning, Zhong Shou stood up, his body expressionless as he looked out at where the two girls came from. Just as Yi Feishuang thought that this fellow was dumb enough to go head-on against those two sects, Zhong Shou suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Zhong Shou's head felt numb, thinking to himself that there were really too many people. Thinking about it for a moment, he decisively expanded the golden shuttle in his hand, causing it to expand to 1,000 feet long. Forget it. I don't have time to bother about them. Why don't I test this royal demon god shuttle and see how it is? Chapter 5:14. He probably fled. They were still on that nameless island. However, the people who were discussing there had changed. The one who spoke was Fang Ming. Just now when I saw him walk out of the Dragon Hall, I felt that the golden shuttle in his hand had some history. It seems like it is the main body of the Royal Demon God Shuttle. Legend has it that this item can cross worlds and instantly cross 1,000 miles. As expected, it isn't ordinary. Opposite him was Luoming, whose face was green. There was another person beside him who was wearing the Daoming sect uniform. He was around 40 years old, but his body was even uglier. Then, how about we give it to him now? This person has the Royal Demon God Shuttle, so we won't be able to catch up. Scoff. Brother Chuli, are you afraid? Are you going to give up? Luoming wasn't in a good mood, and his lips were filled with disdain. Are you afraid of that longing old man? Chuli held his breath, and then he scoffed unhappily. My Daoming sect naturally won't let go of senior brother Shangyue's death. However, this person has the shuttle in his hand and can travel 1,000 miles. The Royal Demon God Shuttle is also really firm, and it was able to block our grade 9 spells and was unharmed. Instead, he broke out and injured dozens of people. Which one of us can stop him? He was indeed a little afraid because Shangyue was the one who attacked first, and he wasn't in the right. If that Zhong Shou was just a monster king, then it was okay. However, behind him stood Long Ying. It was said that when this person was at his peak, even End Realm experts had to retreat. How could he not be afraid? It was okay to work with the demon sect. However, if others found out, it was still a little inappropriate. Fang Ming seemed to know what he was thinking about, smiling and persuading. Okay, Brother Luo. Actually, Brother Chuli is helpless. With the Royal Demon God Shuttle, we can't trap him. Let's try to search nearby, and if we can't find him, then we will give up. Actually, we just need to wait for 2 months, and that person won't be able to jump out of our hands. Chuli's eyes squinted, and then he nodded his head. That's true. Donglin Cloud Continent is about to have a war. As far as I know, the Thousand City Alliance will take action within 2 months. If this person were to die in our hands, Long Ying would definitely not let this matter rest. But if he were to die on the battlefield, he would have nothing to say. Even if Long Ying wants to take revenge, we won't be afraid of him if we work together with the Lingyun sect and a few other sects. Luo Ming's brows were still tightly knitted. It seemed that he was still unwilling to give up. However, he also knew that he couldn't go overboard. After all, the Daoming sect was not a vassal of the primitive demon sect. Mr. Fang, who was standing beside him, also had an ulterior motive for helping him. Furthermore, if that Zhong Shou wanted to escape and hide his tracks, it would indeed be difficult to catch up to him. But that dark demon relic, at this moment, Fangming said leisurely, "Brother Luo, don't worry. In this world, there are only a few people who know how to use the dark demon relic. If it were anyone else, it would be useless even if they took it. If you're willing to lend a helping hand to the Lingyun sect, they'll be overjoyed. Who would dare to snatch the dark demon relic? If you're not worried, then I'll help you build the bridge." When Luo Ming heard that, he smiled. Qiuli, who was beside him, heaved a sigh of relief. He relaxed and temporarily placed down the hatred of Shang Yue's death. What a joke! Do you know that the Kongqi sect has already sided with Gantian Mountain? That sect is really despicable. During these 2 years, they actually helped that Zhong Shou kid craft hundreds of thousands of spiritual artifact-grade armor and weapons. They also helped him purchase millions of them. That Tianqi old man, I really don't know if he's old and muddled. Does he really think that other people don't know? 2 million spiritual artifacts, what a huge trump card. Does he really think that unparalleled general talent Zhong Yuan is invincible? That old man is so smart, but in 2 months, he will lose everything. Who knows how he will end this? Luo Ming's eyes squinted as he laughed coldly. Fangming knew what Qiuli meant. He wasn't mocking, but he wanted to draw the strength of the 2 sections. To attack the Kongqi sect. He shook his head. He is indeed a little muddle-headed. However, we need to think about this matter carefully. We can't be careless. Since the Kongqi sect dares to do this, they definitely have something to rely on. It is best if we are more careful. While he spoke, he was sensing that thread of true dragon aura. Destruction dragon pellet, that thing was really taken out by him. Half a day later, 9,700 kilometers to the west, there was another cloud island with a circumference of around 200,000 feet. A ray of light suddenly descended and landed on a hill. When the flying shuttle was kept, Zhong Shou's body landed. He was a little surprised as he looked at the item in his hand. This wasn't a normal grade 2 magical treasure. To be able to block so many spells without being damaged, one could see how strong it was. Yi Feishuang said that this item was still lacking a few parts. Who knows what it would be like after it was gathered? Yi Feishuang's eyes were also a little envious. At this moment she scoffed. "I thought that your highness had some ability, but in the end you still escaped." Zhong Shou shook his head, his expression solemn. "I didn't escape. I turned to avoid the attack. What do you know?" Yi Feishuang was startled and then burst out into a laugh, thinking to herself that this Zhong Shou really cared about his face. He was obviously escaping, but he actually thought of the word turn. Then, Zhong Shou looked down the mountain with a smile that wasn't a smile. This place was really wide and not far from Donglin Cloud Continent. There was a city built at the foot of the mountain. Along with the wilderness around, there were roughly 1 million people. Do you still remember those few primitive demon sect disciples that were injured? Within the Dragon Hall, those people have probably suffered heavy losses. Yi Feishuang's brow furrowed. Naturally, she knew about that. However, what did that have to do with them escaping here? Zhong Shou grinned. This place is the most densely populated and is the closest to the 3rd Dragon Hall. It is also the most secluded place. Where do you think they would choose to recover from their injuries to make up for their consumption? Yi Feishuang was instantly shocked. She knew that the spells of the demon sect were mostly strong, far stronger than normal spells. However, they all needed the blood and energy of living beings as a guide. However, after all, there was a limit to what a person could carry and it couldn't be regenerated. After all, that Daoming sect was still an orthodox Taoist in name. Even if they joined hands with the Yuanshi demon sect, it wasn't convenient for them to do so. Even Yi Feiyan understood. Her eyes were filled with worship. It was like she was saying that Brother Shou was really amazing. A cold glow appeared in Ruoshui Zhong Yuan's eyes. Attack them one by one? Yi Feishuang thought about it and couldn't help but mock. Are you really planning to fight to the death with the Yuanshi demon sect? If you want to kill the tiger, be careful you don't get killed by the tiger. Zhong Shou broke out into a laugh. When did Maicang Xing Dao and the Yuanshi demon sect stop fighting? As for the danger, naturally, Zhong Shou knows about it. Following which, he was too lazy to bother about this woman and started to set things up. Yuanshi Zongling's senses were really sharp. He didn't hope to set up a large-scale spiritual formation. He only hung the 365 silver needles in the air above the city. Then, he placed dozens of high-grade illusionary element beast crystals within. It caused the silver needles to totally hide their track. In the last life, he had studied formations and was at the Heaven Realm. Along with the Sky Fox illusionary element bloodline, his understanding of illusionary techniques was much deeper. He knew that he could hide from those Yuanshi demon sect cultivators before they entered the formation. Even if they noticed, it was okay. He would just have a fair battle. Following which was the 7-star spell altar. Zhong Shou placed it underground, at a hidden spot where spiritual veins gathered. Not only did he not care about the cost, but he also laid out a large-scale illusionary formation to cover the true location of the 7-star spell altar. It also had defensive abilities. With Zhong Shou's estimation, it could take at least 20 grade 9 spells. Even Yi Feishuang's mouth was agape when she saw that. Her mother was known for having many treasures and was really rich. However, she couldn't bear to spend like Zhong Shou. Looking at the spiritual formation, there wasn't anything special about it. However, it couldn't block the beast crystals, there were so many of them. Originally, she didn't have high hopes, but now she felt that Zhong Shou had at least a 60% chance of winning. She was also surprised. Actually, this fellow didn't have any deep hatred with the Yuanshi demon sect. She really didn't understand why Zhong Shou would spend so much to kill Luoming. At this moment, it wasn't good for her to ask. Even if she did, this fellow wouldn't reply. Next, they just had to wait. Zhong Shou estimated that the Yuanshi demon sect wouldn't give up on searching so easily. To reach this place, they would need at least 2 more days. Then, he took out the Darkness Demon Relic. With the 7-star spell altar inside and the illusionary formation outside, he didn't need to be afraid of the aura of this item leaking out. The Taoists and those god beasts and elite beasts all cultivated pills. The Buddhists and a portion of the demon sect formed relics, the essence of their life gathered. However, in Zhong Shou's hand, it wasn't left by any demon path great evil. Instead, it was a living being known as the Darkness Demon, a natural demon. Peak Spirit Realm? Identifying the grade of this heaven demon relic, Zhong Shou was in deep thought. Hesitating slightly, he still held onto this relic tightly. His heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique had already turned into a black hole. However, it could still swallow everything. With a slight suck, he sucked out a few threads of pure essence energy. The moment he swallowed it, he started to purify it, using the white hole Dharma to expel all the useless impurities. He even directly burned it. The main thing was that the demon aura and demon thoughts were the most problematic. However, moments later, when this thread of true essence was purified to the extreme, it was extremely pure. Zhong Shou's brow furrowed. He could still feel a thought hidden within. No matter how he tried to purify it, he was unable to purify it. As expected, I am still lacking that thing. Zhong Shou couldn't help but open his eyes and look towards the east once more. There weren't many people who knew how to use relics, but Zhong Shou was one of them. Since Luoming was searching for this item, it seemed like he had most probably found the most crucial thing. As expected, he still needed to take this person's life. That item also needed to land on this person's body. Thinking about it like that, Zhong Shou didn't stop absorbing the Heaven Demon Relic. Instead, he increased his strength and crazily swallowed and absorbed. Using this vast essence energy, he started to transform the fire and water spiral energy in his body. To be continued. Chapter 5:15. As time went on, ocean amounts of 5-element spiritual energy gathered over, caused water and fire true chi to turn into yin and yang. The 9 spiritual veins that merged into his body also started to change under the impact of the essence energy of the dark demon relic. This process lasted for a full day. On the second day, the internal energy flowing in Zong Shou's chakra meridians had totally changed to black and white. Since Zong Shou deduced the cultivation method in the stargazing tower, he had wanted to start. However, after that, he didn't have the time to do it. At this moment, using the power of the dark demon relic, he was able to complete a process that would have taken tens of days or even months in just 24 hours. However, the threads of demonic intent that seeped in were gathering more and more in his body. Zong Shou's expression slowly turned vicious. All the evil thoughts in his heart were magnified. His eyes were blood red, and layers of black scale-like skin appeared on his body. Black energy wrapped around his body. Just as Zong Yuan, Ruoshui, and the others were stunned and didn't know what was going on, they were extremely worried. Zong Shou was in his body, detonating the 18-cloud shocking god-destroying sword seeds in his dantian. At that instant, countless powerful sword intents were unleashed. They followed the 9 chakra meridians and charged in all directions. It also destroyed the demonic intent and energy that had charged into his body. Zong Shou bore with the pain, and in just a few cycles, he wiped out the demonic intent. Not only did the changes in his skin stop, but his expression also slowly returned to normal. However, the sword intent was still charging around in his body. Even if he destroyed the demonic intent, he only lost a portion of it. Without a target, it had already started to damage the inner walls of his chakra meridians. Zong Shou thought about it seriously, and wanted to release this portion of sword intent out of his body. However, just as this thought rose up, he felt a vast essence energy explode out from the center of his brows, charging down along his meridians. In an instant it filled his entire body. Is this the Cauldron Dao embryo? Zong Shou was startled and realized that it was most likely Zhao Yinran who had broken through the 7th rank. During the past 2 years, the embryo of Dao implanted in Ji Hao's body had accumulated a great amount of pre-world life force. At this moment, the reverse nurturing began, but it was boundless and surging, as if there was no end to it. There were also threads of comprehension towards heaven and earth, and the various runes that suddenly appeared in his heart. Zong Shou already knew about most of them. However, there was also a portion that he had yet to grasp. Zong Shou's eyes flickered as he chuckled in his heart. What a coincidence! Since that was the case, so be it. If you don't take the gift from the heavens, you will be punished instead. Let's see if I, Zong Shou, can blast open the gate of heaven. He had barriers from heaven. Zong Shou's earth gate was not only sturdy, it was 10 times stronger than an ordinary person's. The same was true for the gate of heaven above his head. Although it couldn't be considered a true barrier, it was still tough to break open. At this moment, Zong Shou first used the scattered cloud shocking god-destroying sword intent as a guide to charge in. In an instant, numerous scattered sword intents exploded out, piercing thousands of holes in the gate of heaven. Then, he saw that behind the gate of heaven, there was also a seal word talisman. Zong Shou was stunned, and then he laughed coldly. The vast essence energy spat out by the Dao embryo also charged over. It still turned into a sword shape, totally destroying the seal word like a hot knife through butter. When the gate of heaven was totally opened, Zong Shou could finally sense that there were many giant spiritual veins in the sky. There was also vast spiritual energy flowing through the stars. In the past, he could only draw power from the ground. However, today, he could borrow the power of the entire heaven and earth. Zhongsho couldn't help but feel lost. This was the feeling of an ascended master. He had not felt this for many years. Stepping into this step meant that he had truly entered the gates of the heaven realm. Since he formed the Dharma and his soul power entered grade 7, he could sense the heaven veins galaxy. Using the soul body to sense it was much clearer. However, Zhongsho felt that it wasn't as good as when he was an ascended master in his last life. Following which, he took in a deep breath, calming his emotions down as he quietly felt all of this. He knew that each time he broke through, it was the moment when he was most compatible with the heaven and earth, and he had the highest chance of comprehending something. Moments later, the essence energy that was still gushing out suddenly sank into his energy ocean. It slowly gathered. Just as the chi sword was about to form, it split apart. It turned into one black and one white, circling in his energy meridians. It also had some absolute beginning aura. As expected, is it because yin alone doesn't grow, yang alone doesn't grow? Mocking himself, Zhongsho stopped bothering about it. Instead, he focused on his soul, quietly meditating for a moment. Zhongsho started to move once more. With a thought, dozens of brand new runes formed. Among the heaven talismans, the lightning, fire, and water talismans all started to change. Its size didn't increase by much, but there were many more spiritual light. In that instance there were many more threads that stretched all about. Although it didn't become the core of the talisman formation, it was much stronger than the other true spiritual charms. The moment these 3 heaven talismans were formed, the black and white holes also swelled up. Out of the fire and lightning talismans, he had the sky burning blood and the lightning phoenix mark, so he was good at them. After breaking through, it was actually time to form them. However, he was worried that his body would lose balance once more, which was why he delayed it. This time, the comprehension that Zhao Yanran fed back to him allowed him to form the water word heaven talisman in one go. His spiritual sense exploded and crazily swelled. His spiritual sense also expanded far away, spreading outwards. Zhongsho enjoyed it while he continued to observe his body and soul. The heaven and earth talismans have merged into one, forming a U word. Now that one of the 18 talismans is empty, I can add in the Ming word. He used his spiritual sense to touch the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual energy. Then, he frowned. Barriers from heaven, the true final obstacle was the part that broke through the celestial path gate, which was his heaven barrier. Compared to the earth gate, it was several times more difficult. It wasn't something that the heaven gate could compare to. Sighing, Zhongsho came back to his senses. Then, he saw that Zhong Yuan, Ruoshui, and Feiyan's faces were all filled with joy. Yi Feishuang's expression was really complicated. Congratulations, Your Highness. Now that the heaven gate has opened, there are no problems with spiritual cultivation and martial cultivation. When one cultivated to such a stage, their soul power went from yin to yang. Their internal energy also went from yang to yin. Although there were still conflicts, it wasn't as good as before. Dual cultivation could raise one's cultivation speed by several times. Zhongsho smiled and didn't comment. Moments later, his eyes were filled with coldness and anxiousness. They are here. From afar, one could sense 20 auras swiftly flying over. However, out of the 3 grade 9 experts, only 2 were left. One of them was Luoming. The many Yuanshi demon sect experts were also reduced by a third. Zhongsho was startled and didn't bother much. His spiritual sense surged back in case the enemy sensed something. His spiritual sense also calmed down, like a dead tree sitting on the spell altar. He only needed Luoming to be here for this battle. East of Cloud Saint City, 6,000 miles deep in the cloud ocean, deep in a cave. The white-haired old man sitting at the main seat side. The 2 of you. I haven't cared about worldly matters for many years. Although I am a spiritual grandmaster, I know that in the eyes of the true experts of the millions of worlds, I am like an ant. I am only willing to focus on cultivation. Do the two of you really want to drag me into this matter? In front of the old man, there were two people who were really calm. If Zhong Shou was here, he would be able to recognize that one of them was Long Ruo. However, at this moment, he was really expressionless. The one who replied was the other, the former Pill Spirit Mountain First Seat Ling Weizi. Why does Brother Shuyun say that? This matter is closely related to our Donglin cultivation world. Brother Shuyun is a factionless cultivator of our Donglin, and we have been on the same side these few years. How can you not get involved? If we allow that Gantian mountain to unify Donglin, no one will feel good. Our Lingyun sect is also lacking in manpower, which is why we have to beg you. I know that Brother Shuyun has a close relationship with the northeast cities of Donglin. Even if you don't help, please. Ling Shuyun laughed coldly, nearly mocking out loud. What he meant was that he was protected by Lingyun's sect, so how could he not help? A moment later, he suppressed his anger. The monster king of Gantian Mountain is the disciple of Long Ying. How is your Donglin sect prepared to deal with him? Lingyun's sect wasn't afraid of the Gantian Mountain monster king taking revenge, but Ling Shuyun couldn't. Without Gantian Mountain, Zhong Shou would only be more terrifying. The battlefield is heartless, how else can we deal with him? Ling Weizi laughed, his eyes shining. Just in case, I will pay a huge sum to invite Osamu Hara to help. This person is good with the sword and is merciless. He has the same personality as Jueyu, but he is more vicious. Is Brother Shuyun at ease? Your Lingyun sect has already found traces of Osamu Hara? Ling Shuyun's eyes constricted as he asked anxiously. However, Ling Weizi smiled and didn't speak. Thinking about it seriously, Ling Shuyun's expression returned to calmness. Please allow Ling Shuyun to consider. Ling Weizi knew that he couldn't force him too much, smiling arrogantly as he stood up and left with Long Ruo. Not long after the two of them left, Ling Shuyun waved his hand. Ling Shuyun waved his sleeves, and a figure walked out of the cave. The figure looked calm, graceful, and elegant. Jingyuan City Lord, you also saw it? It isn't that I don't agree, but that Lingyun sect won't give Zhong Shou any chance. I really don't see any chance of him winning. That person was Su Jingyuan, who smiled slightly. That might not be the case. Why don't you wait a little longer and make a decision after meeting my ruler? Ling Shuyun laughed coldly, shaking his head slightly. I will treat today's matter as if it didn't happen. After you go back, don't have any other thoughts. If you anger Lingyun's sect, even I won't be able to save you. Lingyun's sect is a 10,000-year-old sect. Their strength far exceeds your imagination. In his heart, he was already a little impatient. This Su Jingyuan was pretty much dragging him into a fire pit. Although he was unhappy with Lingyun's sect these few years, there was no need to throw his life away. Just as he was thinking about that, a nearly undetectable spiritual energy fluctuation spread out from the distance. Ling Shuyun was stunned. He knew the direction. It was a small island 3,000 miles to the east. Chapter 516. The 1,000-year plan of our Yuanshi demon sect is about to come to an end. This is the crucial moment and we don't have enough people. Isn't it inappropriate for us to interfere in Donglin Cloud Continent matters? Then Senior Brother Me, could it be that our sect has been humiliated by Zhong Shou several times and we can take it? Luoming laughed coldly. At this moment, the one who said those words was his senior brother Mi Tuoluo. When the latter heard this, he held his breath and then shook his head. I feel that it won't be so easy to deal with that person. Junior brother is selfish. Be careful that you don't swallow him and instead break your teeth. 3 shrines working together and at least 5 spiritual houses. I don't believe he can overturn the heavens. Scoffing coldly, Luoming's face was filled with cold disdain. If not for the Dragon Hall Legacy Land, I wouldn't be able to use 20% of my strength. At that time, I would want him to die. Who cares about that Long Ing? They had arrived at the small island in front of them, flying into the sky above the city. At this moment, Mi Tuoluo didn't say anything more. Luoming laughed coldly. He didn't do anything and just a demonic aura descended. However, at that moment Luoming was wary. The people around all looked around, only to see hundreds of golden needles appear. Streaks of crimson flames appeared out of thin air in all directions. Ambush? Luoming frowned. Subconsciously, he released his spiritual altar. His mind was filled with questions. Who dared to ambush their Yuanshi demon sect? Righteous Path sects? The spiritual wave was about to arrive, and it was too late to calm things down. To start a war now was not worth it. The moment such a thought rose up, numerous lightning bolts formed. It merged with the blazing red flames, and turned pure black in an instant before exploding violently. The dozens of Yuanshi demon sect cultivators in the air had solemn expressions, and were already on their guard. However, when the black flames surged over, instantly covering the sky, be it the spell barriers, energy, or spiritual artifacts, they were all unable to block it and were directly burned through. It caused dozens of screams to ring out. Apart from that, there were numerous lightning bolts jumping and shining between the silver needles. Just a simple familiarity caused another 4 grade 7 cultivators to turn into dust on the spot. Luoming felt his heart bleed. These were the true elites chosen by the sect to head to the Dragon Hall. However, at this moment, it was extremely difficult for him to take care of himself. He borrowed the power of the spell altar to prevent his body from being engulfed by the black flames. The 2 protectors were both grade 8 martial honorables. They were close to the spell altar and managed to survive. With a spell, they summoned 2 grade 9 spirit beasts with different appearances. Luoming's spiritual sense went all out to sense where the black flame spiritual technique came from. A moment later, his eyes turned sharp. Bastards! Xianglong, come out! The moment he said that, a giant beast flew out from the spirit beast bag. It was as if he was in the shape of a dragon, but he also had a powerful dragon aura. However, its body was 3 times the size of an ordinary 9th grade true dragon. Mi Tuoluo charged out of the black flames and followed closely behind. A red light flashed around his body as he charged down towards the foot of a mountain. At this moment, Zhongshou stopped using the sky-burning flame ability underground. He chanted a mantra and instantly turned the 2 puppet spirit descending talismans into silver-armored paper men. His soul also came out of his body and entered the body of a paper man on the left. Then, he held the broken tan sword in his hand. 2 people along with 7 white lights charged out from the ground. The moment they came out of the ground, Zhongshou's sword light gathered up as he drove the paper man to charge at the Xianglong, only to see a giant cold aura spread out from the mouth of the dragon. Within 10,000 feet, pretty much everything froze up and it even spread into the distance. The giant dragon claws on its front legs slapped over. Zhongshou laughed coldly, his body flashing as he dodged the giant claws without much effort. However, he didn't avoid the cold aura at all, flames burning around his body. Fire Dragon Vast Sword, Flame. Wind Cloud Dragon Sword, Wind. Lightning Dragon Sword, Lightning. The 3 types of true dragon sword intense stacked together. The flame at the tip of Zhongshou's sword turned black. Using the tens of millions of strength of the grade 9 paperman, it caused the sword glow to become even more eye-catching. The 9,999-foot red sword light just spun around and smashed the cold aura into pieces. The elephant dragon's eyes were instantly filled with fear. Zhongshou's expression was cold, the sword light flashing as he slashed into the head of the Xianglong. Like breaking rotten wood, it smashed this grade 9 top elite beast into pieces. Zhong Shou, it's you? Luoming's eyes were about to pop out of their socket. He didn't even think before tossing a black iron token onto the spell altar. In midair, it turned into a black lightning bolt, charging down towards the silver-armored paperman that Zhong Shou was leaning over. When the lightning flashed, even Mi Tuoluo's pupils constricted. Zhong Shou exclaimed, not hesitating at all as his soul left his body, changing into another body and entering the body of another paper person. Just as he changed his body, the silver-armored paperman was smashed into pieces by the black lightning. Zhong Shou didn't even blink, the sword light flashing once more as he clashed with Mi Tuoluo. Kung! With a sword ring, the two of them flew backward upon contact. Just as the silver-armored paperman was struck by the giant dragon and was forced back several feet, Zhong Shou's soul left his body once more. Using his soul to drive the sword, he chased after Mi Tuoluo. The latter was caught off guard and barely managed to defend. The two of them struck out 100 times in an instant, the sound of swords clashing rang out in the air. However, 3 breaths later, Zhong Shou's sword finally broke through the heavy sword light. It directly split Mi Tuoluo's head into 2. It was also at this moment that the second bolt of black lightning struck down from the spell altar. Zhong Shou frowned. In the end, he used his mind. He took out several 8th-grade spiritual weapons from his Qiankuan bag in succession. As expected, they were all smashed into pieces and turned to dust. At this moment, the battle situation in the sky had calmed down. Most of the Yuanshi demon sect cultivators who escaped from the black flames died at the hands of the Saint Fire Silver Ants. 2 of them were killed by Ruoshui, who leaped into the air with 1 sword. At this moment, the remaining Yuanshi demon sect disciples were all hiding in the spell altar. Luoming's eyes were filled with rage as he looked at Zhong Shou. There was actually a black token in his hand. Zhong Shoxin was alert. Looking at the token in his hand, he thought to himself that it was the lightning tribulation token. He didn't care at all, waving his hand. His physical body flew out from the ground and merged with his origin soul. Then, he stepped forward in the air and walked in front of the spell altar. The remaining silver-armored paper doll stood behind him to protect him. This lightning tribulation token should be the last one? Do you want to kill yourself, or are you waiting for me to do it? If you kill yourself, I can allow you to reincarnate. The moment he said this, the few remaining Yuanshi demon sect cultivators all had different expressions on their faces. Most of them were furious, but some were tempted. Luoming was so furious that his body trembled. He laughed instead of being angry. Do you, Zhong Shou, think that you will win? You dare to be enemies with my Yuanshi demon sect. You, Zhong Shou, are really bold? However, Zhong Shou was expressionless as he looked over expressionlessly, not reacting at all. However, for some reason, Luoming's heart pounded and he felt powerless. He only felt that the teen in front of him was like a mountain, tough to shake. Before this, he said that he would win. What a joke. With a thought, Luoming didn't hesitate to toss out the token in his hand. This time it didn't gather into a ball, but numerous black lightning glows spread across the sky. A few grade 9 spirit beasts pounced out from within the spell altar. He himself, however, suddenly rose into the air and transformed into a streak of light that soared into the distance. Zhong Shou scoffed and slashed out with his sword. On the tip of the sword there was a black dot. However, it caused the entire sky to instantly turn dark, covered by a black veil. Where the black shadow passed, not only the black lightning but also the spell altar and spirit beast. Along with the few grade 8 cultivators above, they were all swallowed by this sword. Following which was a white glow. The broken tan sword spat out a vast white glow. At this moment there was finally a sound in the sky. Luoming's body was just a few thousand feet away before he was drowned by the white light. Following which there was a loud explosion. It exploded into fine powder, and all the blood and water vapor evaporated, turning into sand and dust that fell to the ground. Zhong Shou casually reached out and sucked a heaven and earth bag that was on the verge of breaking into his hand. Just now, he purposely controlled his strength so that he didn't destroy the bag. Using his spiritual sense to investigate, the item was indeed within. Following which he was startled. He felt an extremely pure essence energy, no weaker than Zhao Yanran's Tao embryo, surge back from the sword in his hand. The essence energy that charged and caused the internal energy in his chakra meridians and his soul ocean to become much stronger. Zhong Shou was startled. What was going on? The purity of this essence energy was far better than the heaven-swallowing energy conversion from before. There was no need to purify it. It was even purer than his internal energy and soul power. Was this the ability of the black and white whole Dharma? Why didn't it appear when he killed that grade 9 beast? Was it because the true qi in his body had turned into yin and yang energy? Or was it because his martial path and spiritual cultivation had both reached grade 7? Just as he didn't understand, Yi Feishuang, who flew over on her artifact, broke his thoughts. You actually won? What happened with those two swords? Even a grade 9 beast couldn't block it. Her eyes were filled with shock. She had guessed that Zhong Shou might have won. However, she didn't expect that Zhong Shou would win so cleanly. Apart from a puppet spirit descending talisman, he didn't suffer any losses. Especially when those two swords were slashed out, Yi Feishuang could even feel that her bloodline was filled with fear and submission. Zhong Shou didn't reply, squinting as he looked towards the west. There seemed to be two people there. One of them had an aura that was at grade 9. As for whether or not they had evil intentions, Zhong Shou didn't know. However, one of them was someone he was familiar with and also one of his subordinate. Just as he was hesitating whether or not to kill them, Zhong Shou's spiritual sense rose up in alarm once more. What a surprise! A Tanqiu who is on the same level as Juyu is something to look forward to. Who knew that I would meet such a swordsman just as I returned to the cloud world? Zhong Shou turned his head in shock, only to see a person suddenly walk out from behind him. He was around 20 years old, looking really arrogant. His eyes were filled with craziness and eagerness to try. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed before he regained his calmness. Sword Maniac Osamu Hara? Chapter 5:17. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed before he calmed down. Sword Maniac Osamu Hara? When he said that, Zhong Shou's expression turned solemn. Silently, he took out a few spiritual pills to recover soul power. He didn't swallow them, directly crushing them, using the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique to swallow all the essence. Then, it seeped into his soul. He couldn't be more familiar with the look of the teen in front of him. Hanging from his waist were two 1-foot-wide, snake-like curved swords. Their lengths were also extremely strange. From the handle to the tip, it was 9 feet long. At the tip of the sword, there was a snake-like forked tongue. His face was slightly ashen white. His smile was like he was totally crazy. He was no different from the sword maniac in the God Emperor game in the last life. He was as famous as Jueyu, but he caused all the experts in the world to have a headache. Although he was called a sword maniac, he was really bloodthirsty. He killed people for fun and did whatever he wanted, which was why he was so tough to deal with. Jueyu was a gentleman. When he did things, he had his own rules and morals. A gentleman could be bullied. This Osamu Hara, however, did whatever he wanted. He often surprised people and was close to a demon. When he was interested, he even dared to challenge Endrealm venerables. Sometimes when he was unhappy, he would find trouble with alien races and kill millions. He had to treat this person like he was facing a huge enemy. You recognize me? Osamu Hara was slightly surprised, following which he smiled happily. It is good that you recognize me. I heard that there are 3 more pinnacle swords in the cloud world. One is 10,000 demons sect Tanchio, one is 10,000 sword vast habitats Tai Chi, one is Gantian mountains Zhongsho. You can't be Tai Chi, you aren't that old. Then, which one are you out of Tanchio and Zhongsho? Zhongsho frowned. I am Zhongsho. However, he knew that at this moment, it didn't matter which identity he revealed. Looking at Osamu Hara's situation, it was clear that he wanted to fight him. It really is you. Osamu Hara seemed to have expected this and nodded his head, a strange look appearing in his eyes. You are indeed skilled in the sword and have the qualifications to be mentioned in the same breath as me. In particular, those 2 sword moves just now were truly exciting. Speaking of which, when I returned this time, the people from the Soaring Cloud sect came to me and asked me to challenge you in a few months. He said that it would be best if he didn't let you live in this world. I haven't agreed yet, but I do owe them a favor in the past. What do you think I should do? Zhongsho still looked indifferent, seizing every second to recover his sea of soul. With your sword maniac Osamu Hara's personality, you naturally wouldn't care about favors. Osamu Hara was startled when he heard that, following which he laughed out loud. You are wrong. If it is a true favor, I, Osamu Hara, know how to repay kindness with kindness and repay kindness with kindness. However, like that time at the Soaring Cloud sect, they took advantage of me. I, Osamu Hara, really don't care. They think that they are doing favors, but in my eyes they are really annoying. At this moment, the people nearby, Zhong Yuan and Ruoshui's faces were all green. They wanted to go to the side of Zhongsho to protect him, but they were all suppressed to the spot by a weird sword intent, such that the 2 of them didn't dare to move at all. It wasn't that they were worried about their own survival, but that they would drag down Zhongsho. Yi Feishuang and Yi Feiyan's faces were ashen white. The 2 of them weren't like 2 years ago when they didn't know anything about the cloud world. The name of this sword maniac Osamu Hara was like thunder in their ears. Only when they heard those words did they relax. However, in the next instance, they saw the corner of Osamu Hara's lips curl up into a weird arc. However, if I can make a swordsman like you fall under my sword, Osamu Hara, it seems not bad. Zhongsho was still expressionless, but Yi Feishuang's brows furrowed. Just as she was about to activate her Grade 9 Ice Flood Dragon, Osamu Hara suddenly looked down and glanced over. That puppet Ice Flood Dragon is your puppet? Not bad. However, do you believe that as long as it moves a finger, I will slay both of you? Yi Feishuang was shocked and hurriedly stopped, grabbing onto Yi Feiyan. Her expression was really ugly. A sharp expression appeared in Zhongsho's eyes. He directly waved his sleeves and turned the Grade 9 paperman beside him back into a talisman and kept it into his sleeve. When Osamu Hara saw that, he looked over, his eyes filled with a teasing expression. It seems like I have overestimated you? I was just saying, and you can't take it. A person like you who can't bow and bend, how can you be the ruler of a country? Forget it, how much have you recovered? 70%. It is enough for me to fight. Zhongsho took in a deep breath and then slightly raised his head. There was no joy or anger, a bright glow in his eyes. Zhongsho is a swordsman first and then a ruler. Since I cultivate the sword, I would rather die than bow and never turn back. Moreover, with you like this, Zhongsho doesn't need to endure. Osamu Hara was slightly stunned, following which he laughed out loud, shaking the sky. What a good don't need to endure. You suit my personality, but why do I, Osamu Hara, want to kill more and more? When his voice landed, Osamu Hara totally disappeared in front of Zhongsho's eyes. Be it his 5 senses or spiritual sense, he couldn't sense this person at all, unable to find any traces of him. Zhongsho's eyes squinted. As expected, it was this move. In the last life, he knew that what Osamu Hara was best at was movement technique. He learned a secret technique. Legend had it that be it the 5 elements, light, darkness, wind, cloud, lightning, it could all move. When fighting with the sword, he didn't care about the rules. Often before one was able to find any traces of this person, they would die under the sword of Osamu Hara. It really made one drool. If Roshue could learn it, it would be great. Thinking about that, Zhong Shou turned back and slashed down with his sword. Just as it was about to slice apart the wind behind him, there was a sharp king sound. Osamu Hara's body appeared behind him. A pair of snake swords dangerously blocked Zhong Shou's broken tan sword. He wasn't annoyed but delighted instead, laughing out loud in excitement. He was like a violent wind, surrounding Zhong Shou and slashing out sword after sword. Each sword brought with it an intense hurricane. The strength of tens of millions of swords might not be as strong as that grade 9 spiritual grandmaster from the Yuanshi demon sect. However, his martial path intent was far above. His sword's speed was faster, more maniacal, and more deceitful, using the peak of sword intent to engage in close combat. Almost every bit of wind power could be used by it, pressing down on the center. Each bit of wind, when it got close, could turn into a lethal blade glow. However, the person in the center was like a rubber ball made of the toughest material in the world. The more he suppressed, the stronger the rebound. He was really calm as he weaved sword shadows, making it so tight that even water couldn't enter. It caused Osamu Hara's snake swords to be unable to get close at all. Just as he reached 200 swords, 9 dragon shadows appeared behind Zhong Shou's body once more. The dragon roar reverberated through the sky. The broken tan sword in his hand suddenly stopped defending and fiercely slashed out. Platinum Dragon Sword, slash. This sword could break gold and break blades. It could also break this violent wind. The white glow was eye-catching, flashing and disappearing. Another kuing of a sword. Osamu Hara laughed out loud, his body explosively retreating, along with the source of the violent wind being forced back. The intense hurricane surrounding Zhong Shou naturally disappeared without a trace. "You are really not bad." As these words sounded out, Osamu Hara's body disappeared once more. However, this time he moved along with the light, becoming faster and harder to catch. Zhong Shou laughed coldly. A small black dot appeared on the tip of his sword. All the light around his body was twisted. Then, he slashed his sword diagonally, causing Yuan Wushang to let out a cry of surprise. 2 snake-tongue sword lights appeared once more, another kuing of a sword rang out. His body explosively retreated for the second time. This time he looked really haggard. The clothes on his body were torn apart and blood seeped out from his mouth. "This is the sword. Unfortunately, I can't see the whole picture. However, I, Osamu Hara, don't dare to let you use all of this sword." Zhong Shou stood silently on the spot, adjusting his breathing to allow his energy to recover to its optimal state. He also knew that the biggest weakness of the One Origin Black Sword and One Origin White Sword was that they stored up power for too long. It was okay to deal with grade 9 beasts and spirit masters, but in front of Osamu Hara, it wasn't enough. However, when he used this move, it was just to scare him. The strength of this person's sword technique was even a little stronger than that of Juyu. Just now he was just probing. The true sword battle would follow. Be it him or Osamu Hara, both of them would go all out. The moment such a thought rose up, Osamu Hara laughed out loud. "However, with just this little bit of sword technique, it really disappoints me." Those 2 snake-shaped sword lights suddenly exploded with sword energy as they slashed over. Where the 2 sword lights passed, all the heaven and earth spiritual energy exploded. The aura was vast, everything in front of Osamu Hara's sword, be it the wind, clouds, gas or those particles floating in the air, all exploded. In the past, when Zhong Shou fought with people and swords, he could often borrow the power of heaven and earth for his own use. Even if he couldn't, he would be able to fight on the same level. However, at this moment, he was totally suppressed. Like this Osamu Hara in front of him was the heavens. Zong Shoxin's heart moved, following which he understood. He finally knew what the path that Osamu Hara cultivated was. Jueyu's sword intent was destruction, destroying everything. The sword intent that Osamu Hara chose was the spiritual energy that formed all things, able to control all heaven and earth spiritual energy. Sure enough, every single one of these two experts in the sword Tao that were equally renowned in the world had chosen the grand Tao that was the most difficult to cultivate, the most powerful, and the closest to the quintessence of the grand Tao. Numerous thoughts flashed across his mind. Zhong Shou's thoughts suddenly calmed down and he regained his calmness. The 9 illusionary longing dragons behind him, a total of 4 of them turned from illusionary to real as they gathered on Zhong Shou's sword, forming into a 6-clawed true dragon. He raised his head and focused on Yuan Wushang. Platinum Dragon Sword, Lightning Dragon Sword, Fire Dragon Vast Sword, Wind Cloud Dragon Sword. 4 types of true dragon swords stacked into one sword. When the sword light slashed out, it was like it had turned into a true dragon, roaring as it struck forward. Hong! Along with a shocking explosion, at that moment, Yi Feishuang couldn't help but cover her mouth. This is the sword intense soul realm. Chapter 518. Sword Intense Soul Realm. A similar mutter rang out 100 miles away. Ling Shuiyun was a little distracted as he looked at the sky. When he noticed that something was wrong here, he brought Su Jingyuan and rushed over from afar. First, he personally witnessed the death of Mi Tuoluo. The black and white sword light that terrified him destroyed Yuanshi demon sex, Luoming in one sword. This Gantian mountain monster king was actually so strong, then. He saw the arrival of sword maniac Osamu Hara. He thought that Zhong Shou wouldn't survive. Who knew that the sword battle between the two of them was far more exciting than he expected. In fact, Ling Shuyun's level was even higher than his own. And in that instant just now, he actually personally witnessed the sword's soul level collision. Sword Intense Soul Realm? The sword has a soul? How is that possible? Su Jingyuan was startled, and then he shook his head. His cultivation was still a little weak, only at grade 7. He used spells to be able to see the situation 100 miles away. At this moment, his heart sunk to the depths of the valley. If Osamu Hara had reached the sword soul realm, then wouldn't the ruler lose for sure? Sword intent clashing wasn't just a battle of intent. It also involved the control of heaven and earth power and internal energy. The strength of true qi and internal energy depended on the strength of one's martial path intent. Which was why at the same cultivation, the difference in strength between sword intent and sword soul realm was huge. Ling Shuyan scoffed unhappily. Why is it impossible? Although I haven't seen the sword soul realm before, I can judge. These two people's swords are connected to their spirits, giving birth to souls. They have truly entered the sword soul realm. They are really strong, really strong. There are actually such experts in the cloud world, such overbearing swords. I am really a frog in the well. When Su Jingyuan heard that, he was stunned once more. 2 people. In other words, my Jun Shang, he. That's right. Your ruler really hides his strength. The strength of his sword path is even stronger than that Osamu Hara's by a little. No teen genius in the world is better than him. He looked at Su Jingyuan with a complicated look in his eyes. Ling Xuan shook his head and said, Now I know why the Kongqi sect chose him and not the Lingyun sect. The 6 pinnacle swords of the cloud world, none of them were weak. Some people said that not long ago, the battle between Tan Qiu and Jueyu in the common people's vast habitat was the peak sword battle of the cloud world. However, it seems like it was much weaker than the 2 of them. Unfortunately, in the cloud world, apart from you and me, No one else has the fate to see it. Staring blankly, Ling Shuiyun didn't have the slightest intention of calling out to his friends. He was a loner by nature, and there were very few people he could be considered close friends with in his life. The only two people weren't in the cloud world. At this moment, he calmly watched from afar. His heart thumped restlessly, and he was inexplicably excited. Although he did not cultivate the sword, such a battle between peak practitioners was still extremely beneficial to him. It was a rare opportunity that one could only dream of. In his heart, he was thinking about whether or not this Zhong Shou could safely escape from this battle. If he could survive from the hands of this Osamu Hara, he would definitely soar into the heavens on the island. Yi Feishuang still used her hand to cover her mouth, suppressing the exclamation. Sword Soul, this Zhong Shou could actually use the sword intent soul realm. Killing Luoming and Mi Tuoluo, so returning to normal wasn't the true limit of this fellow's strength. She only felt that the teen in front of her was like an abyss that she couldn't see through. Sometimes she thought that she had seen through him to the end, but only after she tried did she realize that she was far from being able to see through his true depth. Numerous swords clashed, the sky was covered in vast amounts of energy. The remnant sword wind spread all around, causing the wind and clouds within 100 miles to be messed up. Zhong Yuan and Osamu Hara separated once more. This time, even the latter didn't dare to be careless, retreating 10,000 feet away. Blood wounds appeared on the bodies of the two of them. They weren't injured by the other party. Just now, when they clashed 7 swords, they were on the same level. The reason why they were injured was because their bodies couldn't handle the sword intent soul realm. When the sword soul clashed, the first thing that couldn't take it was their physical bodies. Yuan Wushang had fewer injuries on his body, but his strength was limited. Zhong Shou also heaved a sigh of relief. There were some benefits to having a dual meridian body. With an initial grade 7 body, he could be comparable to a peak grade 8. Yuan Wushang took a look at his body and laughed. He was filled with a crazy aura. You actually know sword intent? Amazing. I, Osamu Hara, have fought 300 battles in my life, and have never been injured. Even Jueyu couldn't. But now, I can't continue to call you Wushang. He continued, I heard that a month ago, Tan Qiu and Jueyu fought for 19,450 swords before the victor was decided, becoming a legend in the cloud world. Unfortunately, between you and I, we only need a few more swords to decide life and death. What a waste. Zhong Shou wasn't moved, only frowning as he looked below. Only when both sides were on the same level would they be able to exchange tens of thousands of swords before the victor was decided. However, if there was a gap between both sides, even if it was just a few millimeters, that could be the difference of a few swords to decide the victor. In the clash just now, this Osamu Hara had the advantage. However, at this moment, what Zhong Shou paid more attention to was what was beneath his feet. The intense battle between the two of them, although they were tens of thousands of feet high in the sky, they were slowly losing ground. However, it also gradually affected the situation. The island shook all over, and the houses began to collapse. Numerous blades struck all around. At this moment, there weren't any casualties, but if this continued, the small island in the cloud ocean would suffer heavy casualties. Less than 10% of the million people would survive. Thinking about it carefully, Zhong Shou looked towards Osamu Hara. Let's change places and fight outside of the cloud world. Osamu Hara was stunned, following which the teasing look in his eyes became even thicker. Who knew that your highness was such a benevolent ruler? Actually, I am okay, but to fight in the void, Zhong Shou, are you sure? Before his words landed, Zhong Shou had already used his sword's soul-level martial path intent to forcefully rip open a scar in the space in front of him. He stepped out and walked out. If one said that all the worlds were like a bubble, then, where he was now was the layer between the bubbles. This place wasn't the normal common people path vast habitat, It was like a stable space gap. Instead, it was a space filled with the energy of the void, chaotic and chaotic. Using his strong martial path intent to resist, he was barely able to prevent his body from being ripped apart by the violent energy here. Osamu Hara followed behind, stepping into this space filled with darkness and nothingness. The two of them were unable to look at one another, but they could sense one another. Osamu Hara was still laughing out loud. I think you are a fool. I am here. But like a fish in water, I won't need 5 swords to beat you. Just for those million lives you are actually asking to die. 2 snake swords slashed over once more. He was indeed like a fish in water, bringing with him endless spiritual explosion strength. However, when the spiritual energy exploded out, power was hundreds and thousands of times stronger than when he was in the cloud world. Zhongsho's eyes didn't even blink as he slashed towards the void. 99 Long Ying's instant dragon sword. With the instant space dragon as the main, it still stacked lightning, wind and fire dragon swords. However, when the sword slashed out, Zhongsho's body also changed position. The instant space dragon was born with the ability to teleport. However, it could still travel freely in this place. With the Ian talisman in his soul, he was pretty much the same as an instant giant dragon. On the side of Osamu Hara, he was slightly surprised. He scoffed coldly, his body shifting slightly to the side. Sword light intersected, instantly clashing with several swords. The two of them flashed in and out of the void. At this moment, within the cloud world, Yi Feishuang's expression was uncertain. She thought about it for a moment before casually shaking her hand and summoning that giant ship. She pulled Yi Feian and entered it. Zhong Yuan's brows rose up, not hesitating at all to enter the giant ship with Ruoshui. Yi Feishuang didn't chase them away, letting the ice flood dragon control it to shrink the giant ship to 100 feet. It smashed into the void and broke through the barrier, arriving outside of the cloud world. Ling Shuyun, who was 100 miles away, was the same. He didn't have a ship, but he had several body-protecting spiritual artifacts on him. He reached out and took out a leaf, stepping on it. After a moment of hesitation, he grabbed Su Jingyuan and rushed into the void as well. The moment he stepped in, he heard Osamu Hara's laughter. Interesting. Interesting. Who would have thought that your attainments in the art of space are actually not inferior to mine? Now this is fun. In the void, one couldn't transmit sound. However, Osamu Hara's internal energy surged, allowing his voice to be heard from far away. A few years ago, Jueyu was the same, surprising me time after time. Unfortunately, Jueyu was able to barely escape from my sword. You, Zhongsho, didn't have such a chance. Another sword slashed over. The sword attacks of the 2 snake swords suddenly changed, becoming really real and really weird. In an instant, the soul power that was spreading all about gathered within the sword body. It caused the 2 snake-shaped sword lights to explode and become thousands of times faster. Not far away, Yi Feishuang, who was on the giant ship, sucked in a deep cold breath. Ling Shuyun, who had been keeping a safe distance from them, narrowed his eyes in shock. This was spirit and martial arts merger. Zhongsho's brows were tightly furrowed. He could feel that Osamu Hara's sword attack, that aura, was 10 times, 100 times stronger. The sword intent locked onto him, causing him to be unable to move. He also didn't feel like he had any ability to fight back. So, he was definitely going to lose this battle? However, his heart was really calm. For some reason, he thought back to how his father-in-law always made him drink. Wei Su also did the same. He said that if he drank some wine, he would most probably win against an opponent that he couldn't beat. It was really weird. However, today his cultivation method had changed to yin and yang energy, making up for some of the flaws. Unless it was a high-grade celestial brew, otherwise it was really tough to get drunk. That sword glow was already in front of him. Zhongsho could already feel his flesh and blood tearing apart. However, His eyes opened wide and he instinctively counterattacked with a sword. Platinum Dragon Sword, / Even if Zhong Shou lost, he wouldn't wait for death. The moment the sword slashed out, the true qi and spiritual energy merged into one. Spirit and martial arts merger. Chapter 519. When the silver-white sword light slashed out, the entire black void seemed to be cut into two halves. Ruoshui and the others who were watching the battle held their breath. Instant Space Dragon Sword. Lightning Dragon Sword. Fire Dragon Vast Sword. Zhong Shou didn't even think as he stacked the few true dragon sword moves on top of it. When the long ing and the two snake-shaped sword lights clashed, there was a sharp ding. First, the spiral sword light was shattered. Then, he waved down and the snake's sword in Osamu Hara's left hand instantly broke. It was directly sliced into two by the platinum sword shadow. Osamu Hara's expression changed. His eyes filled with shock and loss like he still didn't dare to believe it. The opponent in front of him could also merge spirit and martial arts into one. Until another sword light rose up in Zhong Shou's hand, like it had turned into a seven-clawed giant dragon. Only then did Osamu Hara come to his senses, his face turning green. He tossed aside the broken sword and only used one sword to face the enemy. At this moment, in the void further away, Ling Xueyun was totally speechless. He was startled, nearly unable to maintain the leaf spiritual artifact under his feet. It wasn't until Su Jingyuan frowned and asked in confusion did he come back to his senses. "Senior Ling, what's the situation over there? Just now, Osamu Hara's sword seemed to have broken? It seems like my Juanshang has the advantage?" He could only vaguely see the situation on the other side. It was unclear what was going on. He only knew that when Osamu Hara slashed out, his aura instantly rose by several times. It also caused his heart to nearly stop. However, a moment later, the snake's sword shattered, causing everyone to simply not dare to believe their eyes. Ling Xueyun was still in a daze. A moment later, he laughed bitterly. "You didn't see wrongly, it is indeed so. Your Juanshang has also merged spirit and martial arts into one. His sword path is a little better than Osamu Hara's. Now, the difference in strength has been reduced by more than half. Your ruler seems to be able to win this battle?" This last sentence caused Shui Yun's heart to be filled with hesitation and uncertainty. This was because the situation in front of him was simply too inconceivable. The head of the 6 pinnacle swords of the Cloud World, Osamu Hara, was going to be defeated just like that? A few more swords clashed in the air. However, every time their swords clashed, Osamu Hara's face would turn ashen as he retreated. There would always be a few wounds on his body. This was because his body could not withstand the soul-level sword intent. There were also a few times when he was injured by Zhong Shou's sword flashes. There were quite a few times when it almost took his life, cutting into his vitals. The more intense the battle became, the more shocked Osamu Hara became. In the end, he couldn't help but speak out once more. "How is that possible? Zhong Shou, how is it possible that your compatibility with martial arts and spirit as one is higher than mine? 30%? How can it be 30%? When his voice spread out, Yi Feishuang, who was on the giant ship, was stunned once more. He only knew that at this moment, Zhong Shou had a suppressive advantage. He was pretty much suppressing Osamu Hara. The reason why spirit and martial arts as one could achieve it earlier was because of the compatibility between soul power and internal energy. As for the increase in combat strength, it was just a bonus. Only when one reached the celestial realm or god realm would one be able to merge the two into one. Then, in one's entire life, it would be tough for one to achieve above 60% compatibility. Unless one had great luck and great determination, otherwise, one wouldn't be able to reach the end realm. However, 30% compatibility? How was that possible? Even now, that fellow was only at the 7th stage. Did this fellow achieve spirit and martial arts as one when he was grade 2 or grade 3? How was that possible? Zhong Shou's mind was really calm. When he slashed out with his sword, he maintained a state of no thoughts. In his mind, he was calculating and deducing the sword paths of both sides. Only then would he be able to better merge the soul power and true qi into one. However, when he heard those words, his mind was in turmoil. He could sense it clearly. The compatibility between his internal energy and soul power was far above that of Osamu Hara. At least 30% of it was extremely tight. Along with the sword intense soul, each sword of powers was 3 times that of peak grade 9. But why was that so? Was it because in the past, he seemed to have comprehended something, but Zhong Shou didn't think too much about it. Along with his aura climbing up to the maximum, the 9-headed true dragon behind him roared out once more. Platinum Dragon Sword. Instant Space Dragon Sword. Lightning Dragon Sword. Fire Dragon Vast Sword. Extreme Chill Dragon Sword. When this sword light slashed out, the long ing that appeared on Zhong Shou's sword had 7 claws. The 5th true dragon sword intense stacked, causing the sword light dragon shape to become more and more real. Break. A moment later, there was a loud explosion that shook one's eardrums. It was extremely sharp, far stronger than all the sword tips clashing before. Osamu Hara retreated explosively. The last snake sword in his hand was broken at the base. He was in a bad state, his eyes filled with shock and not knowing what to do. A bright glow flashed in Zhong Shou's eyes. The next sword could decide victory. With a thought, the 9-headed true dragon behind him totally disappeared. As the sword slashed down, the originally dark void seemed to become even darker. It totally covered the 5 senses of the people around. Only Zhong Shou could sense that the black dot on the tip of his sword that could swallow everything was the one origin black sword. When the sword slashed out, Zhong Shou could feel the difference. The black hole Dharma was not only absorbing his soul power, it was also crazily sucking out all the Yin element true qi in his body. This time the black hole Dharma was crazily expanding. The strength of this sword was also several times that of the one origin black sword in the past. Osamu Hara's heart was also palpitating, his consciousness nearly falling into a daze. Only when his spiritual sense was twisted and sucked away, and he couldn't sense the surrounding situation, did he finally react. Before this, when he saw this sword technique that could swallow heaven and earth, he was extremely excited. However, at this moment, he only felt powerless. Gritting his teeth, Osamu Hara tossed out an item. It expanded in the air, turning into 100 feet wide silver shield in front of him. When the sword and shield clashed, there was no sound at all. Osamu Hara was unable to sense anything. Only when the darkness dissipated did he spread out his spiritual sense once more. He only felt that the grade 5 silver shield magical treasure had dimmed and was tossed far to the side. Opposite him, Zhong Shou's next sword slashed down once more. This sword gave off a blinding white light, illuminating this chaotic void into a blazing white. It was the one origin white sword. Osamu Hara scoffed, suppressing the despair in his heart. He waved his sleeves and instantly dozens of spell-grade spiritual talismans appeared in front of him. They turned into layers of protective spells that stacked together. 2 more grade 8 spiritual swords appeared in his hands, forming a dense sword light in front of him. Layer after layer, it caused numerous spiritual explosions, like there was no end to it. Pung! A moment later, the white sword light finally slashed down. It was like a hot knife through butter, breaking the layers of spells one by one, following which, the heavy sword light also instantly collapsed. In the end, a blood glow rose up before it was instantly evaporated by the blazing light. When the eye-piercing white light finally disappeared, Feishuang Yufei let out a sigh of relief. Yi Feishuang heaved a sigh of relief. Her entire body had lost all strength, and she collapsed onto the deck of the boat. She was in a daze, unable to come back to her senses for a long time. Ling Shuiyun, who was in the distance, also sighed. Who knows if he was praising Zhong Shou's sword technique or feeling pity for Osamu Hara's defeat. Where he looked, he saw that the lower half of Osamu Hara's body had been sliced apart by Zhong Shou's sword. Most of the remaining parts were also burned. However, under the protection of a spiritual light, he was swiftly fleeing into the distance. His aura was dim and his injuries were obviously extremely heavy. He was not far away from death. However, the moment the light was about to disappear, Osamu Hara's laughter rang out once more. I understand, haha. So that was the case. Zhong Shou, your Tao is unlimited light, endless darkness. A month ago, the snow omen was born because of you. As expected, even the Buddhist faction chased after the source of the Tao. Osamu Hara had a taste of it. I have won every battle in my life, but today I have finally lost to you. You Zhong Shou are actually more suitable than that Jueyu to be my sword-grinding stone. In this life, Osamu Hara won't be lonely. The voice spread out from the distance, like it was said by his ear. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed and then he scoffed. He suddenly took out a grade 8 spiritual sword, gathering true chi and spiritual energy before tossing it out. It pierced through the void, stabbing towards where the voice came from. As expected, in the next instance the voice stopped. As for whether or not this Osamu Hara was dead, he didn't know. The true chi and soul power in his body were mostly used up. Although he had spiritual pills to recover, it wasn't enough. He didn't intend to stay any longer, waving his sleeves and summoning the spiritual shield magical treasure into his hand. Then, he tore open the void and returned to the cloud world. The moment he stepped back, he felt his body unusually empty. However, his tensed nerves finally relaxed. The danger of this battle far exceeded the sword battle with Jueyu. The pressure that Osamu Hara gave him also exceeded that of Jueyu. Be it sword technique or cultivation, he was above the latter. If it wasn't for him merging spirit and martial arts at the crucial moment, then, inexplicably, it reached a 30% compatibility rate. He had no chance of winning this battle. Although Osamu Hara retreated, Zhong Shou's fighting spirit was still raging and couldn't be stopped. Looking into the distance, he only felt a space ripple. An old man in his 70s flew out of the void with Su Jingyuan on a palm leaf magical treasure. Zhong Shou's eyes constricted slightly as he walked over. Although it was 100 miles, his footsteps were neither fast nor slow. However, where his sword intent pointed, the old man could only frown, not daring to make any movements. Like he wasn't willing to resist, quietly standing in the air. In just a short moment, Zhong Shou was already in front of the two of them. He first swept past this grade 9 spiritual grandmaster, directly asking Su Jingyuan, City Lord Su, who is this person? Why is he here? Su Jingyuan smiled, not in a rush to reply, first sizing up Zhong Shou. He knew long ago when this teen was still the prince, he knew that this future Gantian mountain monster king would be able to suppress the cloud world. Today it was indeed so. Chapter 520. Ruler, this person is Donglin factionless cultivator Ling Shuyun. He lives nearby. Su Jingyuan was ordered by the Prime Minister to invite grade 9 cultivators to join our Gantian mountain. This is why I am fortunate enough to witness today's battle. Congratulations, Ruler, for your victory over Osamu Hara. The 6 pinnacle swords of the cloud world are led by Ruler. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed as he recalled that there was indeed a message talisman back to order the Gantian mountain officials to recruit grade 9 cultivators to join Gantian mountain. Who knew that Renbo would actually let Su Jingyuan, who had a sensitive identity, handle this matter? Thinking about it seriously, Zhong Shou knew that Renbuo's plan was to make Su Jingyuan not worry. Renbuo didn't know about the cause and effect of Cloud Saint City, so his actions were a little unnecessary. However, since this Ling Wuzuan had personally witnessed the battle between him and Osamu Hara, he naturally wouldn't let it go. "You are Ling Shuyun, you live nearby?" Seeing the old man bow, Zhong Shou's eyes closed slightly. "Then are you willing to join my Gantian mountain?" This time Ling Shuyun hesitated slightly, raising his head to look at Zhong Shou. He sighed in his heart. Ling Yun's sect planned so hard to use Osamu Hara's knife to kill people. However, they didn't expect that the head of the 6 pinnacle swords would lose to Zhong Shou right after returning to the Cloud World. A total of 347 swords, a clean defeat. He nearly died. At this moment, the gaze that the Gantian mountain monster king shot over made one's scalp feel numb. It wasn't a look of judgment, curiosity, or even a question. He didn't treat him as an equal. He was looking down on him, looking down on him. He was looking down on him like he was holding his life in his hands. In his heart, he was filled with respect. With the strength of this person's sword, he could look down on all living beings. However, he wasn't willing to agree just like that. Ling Shuyun bowed once more and asked, "If I don't agree, what will your highness do?" Zhong Shou held the sword in his hand and laughed, following which he replied simply, "Kill him!" Ling Shuyun's figure froze, and his face was covered with cold sweat. At this moment, he felt that the killing intent of this teen was even stronger than when Osamu Hara was here. His cold gaze was locked onto his neck. This was definitely not a joke. Today, if he really spat out the word no, he would definitely be punished. This Gantian mountain monster king, the fresh head of the 6 pinnacle swords, would instantly slice off his head with one sword. The person in front of him had the qualifications to do so. A bitter smile appeared on his face, and even Shui Yun's voice became a bit hoarse. "Please allow me to serve under the monarch." In fact, he already knew that he had no room to refuse. 16 hours later, the location had changed to Ling Shuyun's cave residence. This place was much better than the small island where the Fuling sect resided. It was said that Ling Shuyun had spent many years to gather the 2 dragon veins here. He also didn't need to share it with others, which was why even though he had reached the 9th level, he lived here. However, his cultivation was still improving every year. After tens of years of operation, Ling Shuyun even laid out a middle-sized spiritual formation outside, protecting this cave tightly. When Zhong Shou woke up from his meditation within the cave, he had recovered a large portion of his strength. The external injuries on his body had also mostly healed. However, a portion of it was still filled with Osamu Hara's sword intent, which he couldn't expel in a short period of time. He also couldn't rush it, so he could only slowly recover. Next would be his internal injuries, which were similarly heavy. Luckily, it wasn't to the point where his organs were all shattered. Actually, during this meditation, Zhong Shou spent most of his time studying the world-shocking yin-yang true qi in his body. Since the battle with Osamu Hara, the internal energy flowing in his 2 chakra meridians started to link with his soul power. Between them, there seemed to be an invisible link, like they could transform into one another. However, the weakness of this world-shocking spiritual art was becoming more and more obvious. As expected, yin and yang couldn't grow alone. Zhong Shou sighed in his heart, which was why when he woke up, his gaze was a little weird. Looking at the few girls waiting in the room, the depths of his eyes couldn't help but give off a green glow. Ruoshui, virgin body, pure yin body, great nourishment. Chu Shui, virgin body, combat martial body, pure heart, thick essence yin, also great nourishment. Feiyan, virgin too, same as Shui, pure heart, dragon blood, also great nourishment. Yi Feishuang, forget about this, it was impossible. Looking around, Zhong Shou was in a daze, feeling more and more that he was a beast. Yi Feishuang felt a chill down her spine. being stared at by Zhong Shou, she felt her hair stand on end. Only when the green light retracted and moved to the side did she feel slightly better. However, for some reason, she felt annoyed. She instinctively felt that she needed to pull her sister away from this fellow, the further the better. She decisively opened her mouth. "Since you have woken up, then it's okay. Feiyan and I will take our leave." Zhong Shou turned his head and looked at Yi Feishuang, not stopping her. "Miss Feishuang, please do as you wish. I will say the same thing. If there are any unexpected matters, you can come to Gantian Mountain to hide." Yi Feishuang scoffed coldly. Those mocking words were stuck in her mouth, and she couldn't say them out. Looking at the battle between Zhong Shou and Osamu Hara, at least in this world, there weren't many people who could match up to them. However, no matter how strong one person was, there was a limit. In a battle between armies, Gantian Mountain definitely wasn't the opponent of the Thousand City Alliance, who had the support of the Donglin sects. She still didn't have high hopes. She didn't say anything more, forcefully pulling Yi Feiyan away. The latter was fuming with anger, her pink lips pouted high up in the air. Even if she ran back, she didn't have time to say much to Zhong Shou. She could only wave her hands towards Zhong Shou to tell him that she would definitely go to Gantian Mountain. Looking on as the ship passed through the cave, Zhong Shou sighed slightly, like he couldn't bear to part with it. In his heart, he was thinking to himself that such a great replenishing energy left just like that, what a waste. At this moment, with Ling Shuyan beside, Zhong Shou didn't worry about anything, taking out the silver shield that Osamu Hara tossed aside. What made him feel weird was that this grade 5 magical treasure spiritual shield could be used by Osamu Hara without using any spiritual energy. That was really weird. Logically speaking, such a magical treasure far exceeded their level. At the very least, one had to step into the celestial path and reach the spirit realm to be able to use it. Its defensive strength wasn't bad, able to block a strike from a spirit realm expert. Moreover, it was perfectly fine. Placing it in front of his eyes and taking a closer look, Zhong Shou understood. As expected, it wasn't a normal magical treasure. On the back of this silver shield, there were actually 6 grooves. This shield could be activated by soul power. It could also use the power of beast crystals and mind stones to activate it. It should be that the higher the grade of the beast crystal thrown in, the stronger the defense of this silver shield would be. The one that Osamu Hara placed in was already broken. He couldn't help but smile. When he came out before this, he wanted to find a treasure for Xianyuan Iran to protect herself. Within the Dragon Hall, he didn't find anything. He was originally planning to head to the ruins where the various cultivators gathered to take a look. Now, before he even started to search, this item was already in his hands. Taking a look, Zhong Shou didn't think much about it, taking out several grade 9 beast crystals. Coincidentally, they were metal, wood, water, fire, and earth elements, and he placed them in order. However, when Zhong Shou looked at the center groove, his brows couldn't help but furrow. His intuition told him that the center piece was the key. It directly affected how much of the strength of this grade 5 magical treasure could be used. He did have a few grade 9 mind stones on him, but their grades were still lacking. Taking in a deep breath, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to flip his hand and take out the darkness demon relic. Following which, he took out a small-sized purifying bottle from Luoming's heaven and earth bag. He poured out a jade-green spiritual liquid from within and directly dripped it onto the darkness demon relic. Instantly, a tragic cry spread into Zhong Shou's ear. Within the darkness demon relic, a black mist charged out. It looked like a human head, spreading all around like it was trying to break free and escape, but also like it was begging Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou was expressionless. A few drops of spiritual liquid dripped down. Each drop of the green spiritual liquid caused the black mist to become thinner. After 4 drops, it caused the black mist to totally disappear, like it had been purified. Zhong Shou laughed coldly, not giving up as he continued to drip. As expected, on the 9th drop, the black mist head appeared once more. This time it was totally smashed. The darkness demon relic that had totally removed the remnant demonic intent was even more pure. When Zhong Shou placed the darkness demon relic into the center groove, a wave of dark silver light instantly appeared on the silver shield. Then, the spiritual light dimmed and was retracted once more. Zhong Shou smiled once more. Although this silver light spiritual shield only appeared for a moment, its strength was tens of times stronger than when Osamu Hara used it. A peak spirit realm relic was really amazing. As long as it wasn't an expert above the celestial realm, no one in the cloud world would be able to break it. Even a spirit realm expert would be able to hold on for a while. After packing up his things, Zhong Shou once again opened up the royal demon shuttle. Bringing along Zhong Shou and the others, along with Ling Shuiyun, they all flew into the air, swiftly traveling. In just a few hours, they arrived outside of the Pill Fountain spiritual house of Pill Fountain Sect. Looking at the mountain in the distance, Zhong Shou's brows furrowed as he stood there in a daze. Thinking about it, it had been a full 2 years since he last saw Xianyuan Iran. Who knows how this righteous and benevolent girl was now? Although he had many spies and hidden chess pieces within Pill Fountain Sect, it wasn't as good as seeing her personally. Sighing softly, Zhong Shou placed the silver light spiritual shield, as well as the tens of grade 9 beast crystals into his heaven and earth bag to cover the spiritual light. Then, he used the message talisman to search for Xianyuan Iran's aura and sent it into the spiritual mountain. After a moment, a message talisman flew out and landed in Zhong Shou's hands. The aura was warm and fragrant. Zhong Shou swept it with his spiritual sense, and couldn't help but smile. Although there were only a few words, received, inconvenient, thanks, miss, kiss, Xianyuan Iran used her emotions to express her true feelings. Especially that kiss word. Zhong Shou instinctively thought of Xianyuan Iran's red face. This righteous and benevolent girl was really bold. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Chapter 521. Using the Royal Demon Flying Shuttle to travel, Zhong Shou used just over a day to return to Gantian Mountain City. This second-grade magic treasure was indeed fast and nimble. What was rare was that it used up very little spiritual power. Even Zhong Shou, with a large grade difference in strength, was able to maintain it for over 3 days. Moreover, he was able to use it freely. It made Zhong Shou look forward to the remaining parts of this item. He landed in the Hanyan Palace at the peak of the mountain. Instantly, there were hundreds of guards who rushed over. After they noticed that the person who came was Zhong Shou, they scattered. Their defenses were really obvious, much more than when Kong Yao came last time. Spreading out his spiritual sense, he could sense that there were several grade 9 experts within the palace. Apart from Mingdu and Lieha, who he invited, there were at least 6 grade 9 cultivators spread out around the Hanyan Palace. Just as Zhong Shou was startled, he heard a shout spread out from 4 directions. Then, there was a giant explosion. The entire mountain was shaking non-stop. In the next moment, Zhong Shou finally knew what these people were doing. He only felt that there were several dragon veins being pulled over and gathered within Gantian Mountain. There were actually a total of 6 dragon veins gathered at the bottom of the mountain, causing the spiritual energy in this place to be exceptionally abundant. Zhong Shou had been running Gantian Mountain for these few years and had accumulated many spiritual veins at the bottom of the mountain. There were even 2 dragon veins. At this moment, after these people worked together to modify it, it became a spiritual land. At this moment, Renbua and the others had already heard the news and came over. The other grade 9 cultivators all rushed over and stood in front of Zhong Shou. Mingdu and Lieha bowed towards him. As for the other 6, they all sized up Zhong Shou with judging gazes. However, they were slightly shocked. At this moment, there were many injuries on Zhong Shou's body. His aura was slightly dim. At the wounds, the sword intent that Osamu Hara left behind was still unable to be removed. It caused the spiritual energy around Zhong Shou to explode out. Luckily, his flesh and blood were buffed by Zhong Shou's spiritual energy, so he wasn't injured by the sword intent. Looking at him, they were unable to see through Zhong Shou's strength. He was actually nearly injured by the spiritual explosion. That sword soul-level sword intent made the scalps of everyone present numb. Out of the few people, there were people who knew their stuff. Their brows furrowed. It is 10,000 spirit sword intent, sword soul level. In this world, only maniac sword Yuan Wushang can cultivate this sword technique to the sword soul level at grade 8 realm. Has ruler fought with him before? Zhong Shou was slightly shocked when he heard that, looking down at this person. Renbua knew what he was thinking, smiling as he introduced. These few people are the helpers that my Gantian mountain recently invited over. These two seniors are called Zhong Fei and Zhong Han. They are from the same race as ruler. These three are senior Hu Ruodong. Renbua introduced them one by one. Apart from Zhong Fei and Zhong Han, they were all from the seven-tail Zhong family. They were from the Zhong family 400 years ago. There was also Hu Ruodong, who was also an ancestor of the Iron Tiger race. As for the other three, one was called Chai Kong, one was called Ling Jiuchen. Just by hearing their surnames, one knew that they were all from Gantian Mountain. The other two were pretty much on the same level as the Zhong family. As for the last one, he was called Hongling. However, he was from the human race and was personally invited over by Renbua. The few of them all bowed. The one that Zhong Shou asked was Zhong Han. His face was still filled with confusion. However, before Zhong Shou replied, Ling Shuyan opened his mouth. 2 days ago, ruler did meet that sword maniac. Ruler fought with him for 347 swords and lost, slashing half of his body and causing Osamu Hara to flee with heavy injuries. The moment he said those words, apart from Renbua, who didn't know who Osamu Hara was, everyone was stunned. The others were all slightly startled. They could not believe their own ears. Hearing the words 347 swords lost, everyone felt that it was expected. There were even some people who felt that Zhong Shou was boasting for being able to hold on for so long. Or did that Osamu Hara show mercy? After all, a grade 8 sword soul level was something that even they had to avoid. However, adding in the son of a god, it gave off a totally different feeling. At first, they felt that it was unbelievable and filled with disbelief. Even if they calmed down, they still felt that it was preposterous. Ling Shuiyun had predicted that such a situation would occur. His expression was expressionless, not showing any unhappiness at all. I am Ling Shuiyun. Although I have been cultivating these few years, 100 years ago I was slightly famous in the cloud world. The faces of the 8 grade 9 cultivators turned solemn once more. So it is, Brother Ling. Your 1,000 chill snow sword name is famous in the world even today. After Zhong Han exclaimed in surprise, he fell silent. He knew that Zhong Han was using his reputation as a guarantee. He also couldn't allow others to doubt his reputation. However, when the few of them looked at Zhong Shou once more, their gazes were different. Apart from the respect they had for Zhong Shou's Monster King identity, there was much more respect. They bowed once more. This was a special greeting to people who were on the same level as them and even above them. Zhong Fei's eyes were filled with surprise. Ruler is really not bad. Who knew that our Sky Fox Zhong family would have such a talent like you before the spiritual wave? You are on the same level as that person. The heavens are blessing our race. Zhong Shou knew that this person was different from Zhong Han. The latter was a branch of the Zhong family, while Zhong Fei was a true Sky Fox direct descendant 700 years ago. However, in terms of direct bloodline, His branch was also a direct bloodline 700 years ago. This was why in this person's eyes, the so-called direct bloodline and branch bloodline, unless the bloodline was really far apart, there was no doubt about it. If one really wanted to talk about it, he might even be Zhong Shou's ancestor. He could treat others as equals, but he couldn't be disrespectful to this person. After greeting the few of them one by one, Zhong Shou wasn't willing to continue discussing the matter of defeating Osamu Hara. If it wasn't for Ling Xueyun speaking first, he wouldn't be willing to reply to this matter. At this moment, he smiled and changed the topic, curiously using spiritual energy to fill his eyes as he looked into the mountain. In your eyes, how many more dragon veins can my Gantian mountain gather? As expected, that Zhong Han frowned. At most we can gather 4 more. This is because of the ruler and the prosperity of the country. This place is the capital, where the energy veins under the ruler gather, which is why there are more. He was a grade 9 spirit master, close to the peak. He had the Sky Fox bloodline and his formation skills were not bad. Among same grade spirit masters, he was one of the top and naturally had authority in this area. However, this place can accommodate 6 grade 9 cultivators. But this place... His voice suddenly stopped. However, the meaning behind his words was clear to everyone. Gantian Mountain could gather 12 dragon veins and accommodate 6 grade 9 cultivators to cultivate here. However, there were 9 people here, which was a little insufficient. Zhong Shou also frowned. Before the spiritual wave, every 2 dragon veins could support 1 grade 9 cultivator to maintain their original realm. Their cultivation could also improve slightly. His original plan was to have 5 or 6 grade 9 cultivators, which was enough. However, he didn't expect that just Renbua alone would gather 6 grade 9 experts in Gantian Mountain. He knew that his Sky Fox race and the other tribes of Gantian Mountain all had many grade 9 experts. This was how the monster race was able to have a place in Donglin Cloud Continent. However, he didn't expect that the few tribes would be able to summon this person back to become a helper of Gantian Mountain. Unfortunately, Dragon Gathering Mountain had already collapsed. If not, they could arrange some over there. I will think of a way to solve this matter. In 2 months it will definitely be solved. Instinctively, Zhong Shou thought back to the small-scale vast habitat within the Dragon Hall. If he could ask Old Man Long Ing or Ao Kuan to move it over. Even if it was a spirit realm or celestial realm cultivator, he could afford it. Even if he couldn't, with the strength of Gantian Mountain at that time. It was more or less enough to gather 60 and above dragon veins. The moment he said that, the people around all smiled, not doubting at all. Only Ling Xueyun was startled. 2 months later, the war between Gantian Mountain and Thousand City Alliance would start. Were these people not worried at all? Mingdu opened his mouth once more. Ruler, Mingdu has been ordered to bring our Fulling Sect Pinnacle Space Dome formation over. Does the ruler want to set it up in Gantian Mountain? When Zhong Shou heard that, his brows furrowed. His eyes were filled with joy. Then, he gave a deep and indiscernible smile, giving off an evil aura. During the middle stages of Divine Emperor, countless factions of power and sects fought over the 10 Ultimate Sky Dome, which was regarded as the best defensive formation in the early and middle stages of the game. He did not want to use it here. Mingdu and Lieha only looked at their expressions. They knew what Zhong Shou was thinking. Not only was he not surprised, but his body trembled. His emotions were unsettled such that the aura around him started to become restless and he nearly lost his composure. This caused the people around to look over in shock. However, how could he suppress the boiling magma-like state of mind in his chest? In the end, it was retribution. This Pinnacle Space Dome formation. It was originally crafted by their Fulling Sect to build their mountain gate. Who knew that in the end, the Fulling Sect would still be wiped out, leaving only them, the remnants. This mountain protecting formation that they weren't able to use in time was used on their enemies. When Lingyun's sect controlled the Donglin sects to wipe out the Fuling sect, did they think that this day would come? The pinnacle space dome formation could lock down heaven and earth. Within 100 miles, it could cover everything. As long as one had enough spiritual energy, it would be tough to break. Looking at the situation, although the ruler had thousands of blood cloud iron cavalry, he still didn't act. He was prepared to wipe out the Donglin sects in one fell swoop and wipe them all out. What a ruthless method! However, they were really delighted. The more vicious they were, the more excited they were. They knew that they had to wait for at least a month and a half, but in their hearts they still couldn't wait. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.